Jeremy Walker rose before first light, his breath forming faint clouds in the cool morning air. The old ranch house creaked and sighed whenever he paced across the worn floorboards. Outside, the world was still in shadow, but the roosters would soon announce the day. He pulled on his leather boots and stepped onto the porch, letting his gaze drift across the empty expanse of land. The sky, still bruised with the lingering purple of night, stretched endlessly across the horizon. Just another morning, he told himself, but the ache in his chest spoke of longing for something, anything, beyond this quiet routine. "Morning, Jeremy," came a muffled voice from behind him. His younger sister, Marie, emerged in a wool sweater, eyes still heavy with sleep. She was 28, her auburn hair braided loosely, the freckles on her cheeks a reminder of how young she looked, despite her responsibilities on the ranch. He offered her a nod. "You ready for feeding time?" She yawned, then forced a small laugh. "Born ready, though it'd be nice if the horses learned to feed themselves." They both walked toward the paddock, where a half-dozen horses waited. The animals nickered softly as Jeremy tossed fresh hay into their troughs. Sunrise painted the land in pale gold, and each beam of light reminded him of the ranch's financial burden. The bank had called again yesterday, pressing for a payment he couldn't fully cover. He tried not to let the worry leak into his voice. "Marie, after chores, can you double-check the fence line?" he asked. "Heard a coyote real close last night. Might be we have a break somewhere." She nodded, brow furrowing. "You bet. You okay, Jer?" "You've been quieter than usual." He patted one horse's flank and sighed. "I'm fine. Just got a lot on my mind." They parted ways near the hay barn, Marie heading toward the field, and Jeremy moving back to the house to fetch his truck keys. On days like this, he usually took a drive up into the foothills, checking on the cattle that grazed the higher pastures. It was a chance to be alone with his thoughts, away from the mounting bills and daily stress. The old pickup sputtered to life, and soon he was bouncing along the dusty road leading north. The landscape shifted as he climbed in elevation. Plains turned to rolling hills, then steep rises of pine and aspen. He slowed at a narrow bend, recalling how his father had once taught him to read deer trails in these woods. That was years before a heart attack took the old man away. Now, Jeremy's responsibilities stretched across every acre, pulling him in directions he never dreamed possible. At a small clearing, he parked the truck and set off on foot. Dawn was in full bloom, the sun casting a gentle warmth through the treetops. He checked a fence section and made a few quick repairs, whistling softly to keep himself company. A hawk circled overhead, scanning for prey. Jeremy marveled at its fierce grace, feeling a pang of envy for such unshackled freedom. He was about to drive onward when he spotted a figure in the distance. A woman, jogging along a mountain trail that threaded higher into the forest. Her movements were deliberate yet confident, though she wore an expression of quiet determination. Jeremy rarely saw outsiders this far up. Something about her posture made him pause. She moved elegantly, but there was a subtle tension in her shoulders, as though she was wrestling with some invisible burden. He considered calling out a greeting, but hesitated. Strangers usually came in fancy SUVs or on guided tours. This one was alone, entirely out of place. Instead, he climbed back into the truck, telling himself he needed to focus on chores. As he drove off, he felt an odd tug in his chest, a sensation that something about that woman would cross his path again. 30 minutes later, after checking on the grazing cattle, he circled back toward the ranch. The morning had blossomed into a crisp autumn day, yet the sense of restlessness lingered in him like a slow-burning ember. Back home, Marie was waiting by the corral fence. "Everything okay up there?" she asked, noticing his furrowed brow. He hopped out, dusting off his jeans, saw a stranger, a woman, out jogging around the old mountain trail. Marie's eyes widened. Hardly see hikers this late in the year. Maybe she's new in town? Jeremy shrugged. Could be. Whoever she is, I hope she knows those woods well enough. I didn't see any gear on her, and the wildlife can get tricky after sunrise. Marie bit her lip. You think she'll be okay? You know we've had reports of wolves. He forced a smile. I'm sure she's fine, probably just passing through. Still, a flicker of unease settled in his gut, even as he went about the day's tasks, repairing troughs, stacking hay, calculating feed costs. That strange woman's determined jog kept looping through his mind. Something about her presence felt like a warning, or maybe an invitation. He wasn't sure which. Charlotte Richardson had been awake since before the sunrise, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and frustration. She left behind the gleaming city penthouse she rarely called home, determined to find clarity in these wild mountains. Dressed in practical leggings and a lightweight jacket, she followed a winding trail that climbed upward, each footstep carrying her farther from the life she struggled to reconcile. At 32, Charlotte had all the privilege anyone could ask for: wealth, connections, a name recognized across the state. But the emptiness gnawed at her, a hollow that parties and philanthropy galas could never fill. She needed something real, something that couldn't be bought. The crisp air of morning stung her cheeks. Every inhale felt like a new beginning. She paused by a rocky ledge overlooking the valley below, taking a moment to catch her breath. Far in the distance, she could see a tiny ranch and a dirt road snaking through the property. She wondered who lived there, what their life was like. Perhaps they had no idea how her family's empire spanned half the state, shaping policies and employing thousands. It was ironic how owning so much could still leave her feeling so untethered. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, yanking her from her reflections. With a grimace, she pulled it out. A message from her stepmother, Miriam, appeared. Board meeting next week, don't be late. Charlotte clenched her jaw. She imagined the swirl of corporate suits, each person gawking at her presence and waiting for her to speak. She often felt like a pawn in their power games. Sliding the phone away, she resolved to stay out here a bit longer. As she resumed her jog, the trail grew steeper, the pines closing in around her. Her breathing deepened, a satisfying burn in her legs, telling her she was pushing her limits. This was what she craved. Raw reality, no silver spoons or superficial compliments, just the pulse of her heart and the rhythm of her feet. She thought back to that old ranch she'd glimpsed. Would the people there treat her differently if they knew her name? Would they expect donations, praise her for her generosity, or cower in awe of her status? She shook her head. That was exactly what she wanted to escape. In that moment, she yearned for the anonymity of these mountains. A sudden crack of twigs snapped her out of her thoughts. She slowed, scanning the dense brush. A chill coursed through her as she recalled reading about wildlife sightings. Bears, mountain lions, even wolves. The reporter had made a sensational story of it. Predators returned to the high country. She told herself to stay calm, but her pulse spiked. She pressed forward, forcing her breath to steady. Her father once taught her that animals sense fear. He'd been a rugged man in his youth, despite the fortune he later inherited. She remembered him telling her, "Charlotte, money is fleeting, but courage defines you." Those words steadied her now. She picked up her pace, hoping to leave any curious creature behind. The trees parted to reveal a gentle slope, scattered with rocky outcrops. She considered turning around. She'd been running for quite a while, and the day was warming up, but a stubborn voice in her mind insisted she go just a bit farther, certain she'd find a vantage point that would let her see the entire valley. She crested a small rise, and her breath caught at the panoramic view. Miles of ranchland stretched out under the sun, dotted with fences and grazing cattle. It looked peaceful and unassuming. She found herself wondering if the rancher who lived down there had the answers she sought, how to live simply, how to feel at home in your own skin. A sudden movement in the trees below drew her attention. For an instant, she spotted a battered pickup truck rumbling away, its driver a silhouette in the morning light. Instinct tugged at her to call out, but the truck disappeared beyond the curve of the road. She let out a long sigh. Perhaps it was better this way. No forced small talk, no polite inquiries about her last name. Turning back to the trail, she resolved to savor her solitude. A rush of wind rustled the pines, sending a light shower of needles onto her path. She stopped to sip from her water bottle, glancing around. In that moment, she felt strangely aware of her vulnerability. Out here, money couldn't shield her from nature's raw power. She drew in a slow, steadying breath. "Courage defines you," she whispered, repeating her father's words. The phrase felt alive against the hush of the forest. For a fleeting moment, she believed she was on the cusp of something new, a discovery about herself that no boardroom or glittering party could provide. Yet, in the pit of her stomach, a hint of warning curled. The day was still young, and the mountains had a way of reminding people just how small they truly were. Late that morning, Jeremy decided to head back up the mountain to check on a wandering calf, rumored to have slipped past a broken fence. The day had grown warm, sunbeams slicing through the leaves in shifting patterns. He felt a small flutter of anticipation, recalling the mysterious woman he'd seen jogging earlier. He wouldn't admit it out loud, but part of him hoped he might see her again. He parked the truck near the trailhead and set off on foot, following faint hoofprints. The higher he climbed, the quieter the world became, except for the rhythmic crunch of his boots against gravel. Occasionally, a bird call echoed, or the wind hissed through the pines, but an unsettling heaviness clung to the air. Something felt off. As he rounded a bend, he heard a high-pitched scream. Alarm jolted through him. It was distinctly human and definitely terrified. Without hesitation, he sprinted toward the sound. His heart pounded as he came upon a small clearing. There he saw her, the same dark-haired woman from earlier, now pressed against a boulder. Blocking her path stood a lone wolf, fur bristling, teeth bared in a low snarl. "Hey!" Jeremy yelled, raising his arms to look bigger. The wolf shifted its gaze, ears flattening. Charlotte, breathing hard, glanced at Jeremy with wide, fearful eyes. Her jacket was torn, though it wasn't clear if she was injured. The wolf growled, torn between threats. Jeremy inched forward, speaking in a calm, firm tone. "Easy there," he murmured, not sure if he was talking to the woman or the wolf. Adrenaline surged, but he forced himself to remain steady. He'd heard stories of wolves returning to these mountains, but never had he seen one so bold. Charlotte's voice trembled. I was just running, and it appeared out of nowhere." Jeremy slowly positioned himself between her and the animal. He had no weapon besides a small folding knife, which wouldn't be much use against a wolf. Instead, he stomped his foot and shouted, trying to scare the creature off. For a tense moment, the wolf held its ground, muzzle curled in a threatening snarl. Then, with a short bark, it backed away. After a few more tense seconds, it turned and bolted into the tree line. Jeremy didn't relax until the wolf vanished completely. He spun around, scanning Charlotte for injuries. "Are you hurt?" She sucked in several deep breaths, nodding shakily. I think I'm okay. Just scratched my arm on the rock." Blood trickled from a shallow cut on her forearm. Her eyes darted around, as if expecting the wolf to reappear any second. "Let me take a look." His voice was gentle now. He grabbed a clean bandana from his back pocket. "Here, hold this on the cut." She pressed the cloth to her arm, her hands trembling. "Thank you," she managed. "That wolf! I had no idea they ventured so close in the daytime." He offered a tight smile, trying to lighten the moment. They usually don't, must have been pretty hungry or disoriented. He looked at the tear in her jacket, noticing the fine material. "What on earth are you doing way up here alone?" Charlotte hesitated. "I needed space. I didn't think—" She paused, swallowing back the tremor in her voice. "I'm Charlotte." "Jeremy," he replied. "We should get you down the mountain. Let me drive you back into town. You'll need that cut cleaned properly, maybe a tetanus shot just in case." She nodded, still visibly shaken, but there was a flicker of determination in her gaze. "I can walk," she insisted, taking a tentative step forward. A grimace crossed her face as she tried to ignore the pain in her bruised leg. He reached out to steady her. "Take it easy. My truck's about 15 minutes that way." They moved slowly, Jeremy matching her pace. Silence hung between them at first, but the shock of the attack soon gave way to awkward conversation. Charlotte cleared her throat. "So, you live around here?" He chuckled quietly. "Yeah, got a ranch down the valley. Been there my whole life." She studied him, her eyes searching for something. "I saw it earlier. It looked peaceful." "Peaceful's one word for it," Jeremy said, forcing a small smile. "Might also call it a struggle, but it's home." Charlotte frowned. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "No, don't worry. I guess I'm just not used to strangers wandering around these parts, especially ones who nearly get themselves mauled by a wolf." She let out a shaky laugh, relief blending with the remnants of adrenaline. "Yeah, not my proudest moment." They reached the truck at last. Jeremy opened the passenger door, helping her climb inside. As he started the engine, he noticed the bandana around her arm had already soaked through with a bit of blood. "We'll head into town. Doc Henderson can take a look." Charlotte's gaze drifted out the window. "Thank you for everything." He nodded, keeping his eyes on the road, though he tried to appear calm. His mind whirled. The woman beside him was more than just a hiker. Something about her clothes, her bearing, she seemed out of place, almost regal in her demeanor. But he set aside his questions. For now, he had one priority, making sure she was safe. The old medical clinic on the outskirts of town was quiet that afternoon, its single reception window manned by a nurse reading an outdated magazine. Jeremy guided Charlotte inside, his hand lightly resting on her back as she limped forward. She bit her lip, determined not to show how rattled she felt. Doc Henderson, a grey-haired man in his 60s, led Charlotte into an exam room. Jeremy lingered by the door, arms folded across his chest. The clinic's sterile smell triggered a wave of memories, broken bones, fevers, the last place he saw his father conscious. He pushed those thoughts away, focusing on the present. Doc Henderson cleaned and bandaged Charlotte's forearm with practiced efficiency. "You're lucky," he said, voice gravelly but kind. "The cut's superficial, but keep it clean." He raised an eyebrow. "You two run into trouble?" Jeremy nodded. "Wolf on the trail." Doc let out a low whistle. "I've heard rumors they're moving closer. Good thing Jeremy here was around." Charlotte offered a faint smile. "He definitely saved me. Thank you, Doctor." Moments later, they stepped back into the hallway. Jeremy glanced at her. "Want me to take you anywhere? Hotel, maybe?" She hesitated. I have my car parked near a cabin I rented, down by Clearwater Lake. But I left it early this morning to go running, and now—" She stopped, realizing she hadn't planned how to get back to her vehicle. Jeremy frowned, considering the distance. "Look, it's late in the day. Why not ride back to the ranch with me? In the morning, I'll help you retrieve your car." Charlotte's eyes flickered with surprise. "You don't mind?" He shrugged, trying to sound casual. "It's no trouble. Besides, after an encounter like that, might be good for you to rest somewhere safe." She looked down at her bandaged arm, then mustered a grateful nod. "Thank you. I appreciate it." They left the clinic, climbing back into Jeremy's pickup. The drive out of town was quiet at first, a tension simmering in the cramped space between them. Charlotte finally broke the silence. "So, you've lived here all your life?" He tapped his fingers on the steering wheel. "Born and raised on that ranch. Took over after my dad passed." "I'm sorry for your loss," she said softly. "Must be a lot to handle on your own." He exhaled, feeling the weight of unpaid bills pressing on his shoulders. "It is, but I've got my sister to help, and the land, well, it's in my blood." Charlotte watched the scenery roll by, open fields, a distant mountain range tinted by the late afternoon sun. "It's beautiful, peaceful even." Jeremy nodded. "Can't argue that." He glanced her way. "What about you? You said you rented a cabin, vacation." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I needed to get away, from work, from expectations." A wistful smile crossed her lips. "I'm not exactly cut out for high society." He wasn't entirely sure what she meant, but he sensed she spoke from a place of deep conflict. "Well, you picked a good spot to find some quiet." They arrived at the ranch just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink. Marie was waiting by the porch, arms crossed. She rushed forward the moment the truck stopped. "Oh my gosh, Jeremy, is everything—" He stepped out, raising a hand. "She's okay. Had a run-in with a wolf." He helped Charlotte out of the passenger seat. "Marie, this is Charlotte. She'll be staying the night." Marie blinked in surprise, but extended a hand. "Wow, that's... Hello, I'm Marie. Are you sure you're all right?" Charlotte forced a reassuring smile. "I'm fine. Just shaken. Thank you for letting me stay." They guided her into the living room, where a faded but comfortable couch beckoned. Jeremy disappeared into the kitchen to grab a glass of water and some pain relievers. Meanwhile, Marie fussed around Charlotte, offering blankets and pillows, her curiosity evident in every glance. When Jeremy returned, Charlotte asked quietly, "Do you have a phone charger I could borrow? My battery's nearly dead." He shook his head. "Got an old charger somewhere, but might not fit your fancy smartphone. Sorry. You can use the landline if you need to make a call." She paused, a flicker of hesitation crossing her features. "Actually, I'm fine. Probably best I stay off the grid for a night." Marie exchanged a look with Jeremy, then offered Charlotte a gentle pat on the arm. "If you need anything, just holler." As Marie headed off, Jeremy turned to stoke the fire in the hearth. Embers glowed, their warmth chasing away the evening chill. Charlotte sat on the couch, gaze wandering the modest decor, family photos, a battered guitar leaning against the wall, the faint smell of oak and leather. "So," Jeremy said after a moment, "guess it's not the sort of mountain retreat you had in mind." She smiled faintly. "Honestly, this might be exactly what I needed." A spark flickered between them, unspoken but palpable. It wasn't just gratitude or relief. There was a shared sense of wonder, as if both were discovering something unexpected within the other. Night settled around the ranch, and as silence filled the spaces between them, neither felt quite so alone. Early the next morning, the ranch awoke to golden sunlight streaming through the windows. Jeremy stepped outside to tend the horses, letting the chilly air clear the remaining sleep from his eyes. His thoughts drifted to Charlotte, her bravery on the trail, the hidden sadness in her gaze. As he checked the water troughs, he couldn't shake the memory of her trembling voice when she'd said she needed to get away. Marie joined him, yawning as she approached. "Our guest awake yet?" she asked, grabbing a rake to gather stray hay. "Not sure. She had a rough day yesterday." Jeremy paused, scanning the horizon. "I'll give her a ride to her car once she's ready." Marie smirked. "She seems nice. Definitely not from around here, though. Any idea what she does?" He shrugged. "Didn't ask. Didn't want to pry." Marie's tone grew soft. You like her? Jeremy felt heat rise in his cheeks. I hardly know her. Marie raised an eyebrow. Doesn't mean you don't like her. With a playful grin, she turned back to her chores. Inside the house, Charlotte stirred from the couch. Her arm felt stiff, but the bandage seemed clean. She gently flexed her muscles, testing for pain. It was tolerable, nothing compared to the storm raging in her mind. How would Jeremy react if he knew about her fortune, about the corporate obligations awaiting her return? Shaking off the worry, she stepped into the kitchen, where she found a pot of coffee warming on the stove. She poured herself a cup, inhaling the comforting aroma. Her reflection in the window revealed tired eyes and wind-tangled hair. She thought about calling her assistant, letting him know she was alive and would be back soon. But something held her back. She wanted one more day in this bubble of sincerity before reality invaded. A moment later, Jeremy entered, boots clumping softly on the worn floor. He removed his hat, setting it on a nearby chair. Morning. How's the arm? Better, thank you. She managed a small smile, her voice still husky from sleep. I really appreciate all of this. He waved off her thanks. Not a problem. You're free to stay as long as you need. She sipped her coffee, hesitating. I was hoping to get my car today, but if it's not too much trouble, maybe I could see more of the ranch first. Surprise flickered in his eyes, followed by cautious interest. Of course, we've got some chores to do, but you can tag along if you want. Outside, the day was bright and clear. The ranch bustled with daily routines, hay bales to move, fences to mend, animals to check. Charlotte walked beside Jeremy, occasionally stumbling on uneven ground, but determined to keep up. She asked questions about the horses, the soil, the ranch's finances. He answered candidly, though he glossed over the deeper problems. At one point, they stopped by a horse named Daisy, a gentle mare with a speckled coat. Charlotte tentatively reached out to stroke the animal's muzzle. She's beautiful, she murmured, so calm. Jeremy chuckled. Daisy's our sweetheart. If I ever need to show a city kid what a horse feels like, she's the one I pick. Charlotte couldn't help but laugh softly. So I'm like a city kid to you. He shrugged with a crooked grin. You do have that air about you, but you're braver than most. Not everyone would be running these trails alone. Her expression turned thoughtful. I wasn't always part of that world. My father, he wanted me to understand responsibility. He taught me things that money can't buy. Jeremy studied her closely, sensing a heavy weight behind her words, but he chose not to press. They moved on, repairing a sagging fence near the far pasture. The work was slow, methodical, the silence between them surprisingly comfortable. By midday, they were both dusty and a little sweaty. Under the broad shade of an oak tree, Jeremy offered her a canteen of water. She drank greedily, cheeks flushed. I'll need to head back eventually, she said, wiping her mouth. People will be wondering where I am. Yeah, Jeremy said quietly, bracing for her inevitable departure. I'll drive you whenever you're ready. Her gaze flicked around the ranch. You know, my cabin rental is good for another week. Maybe I could come back to visit. The corners of Jeremy's mouth twitched upward. Sure. Any time. They locked eyes, a current passing between them, full of unspoken possibilities. Then, just as she handed the canteen back, her phone buzzed. She retrieved it from her jacket pocket, noticing the battery had barely enough charge to display the caller ID. Miriam Richardson. Her stepmother. Panic flashed in her eyes, and she quickly silenced the device, voice tense. Everything okay? Jeremy asked, concern etched on his face. She forced a quick nod. Yes. Just not ready to talk to her yet. He watched her carefully, curiosity warring with respect for her privacy. Then he nodded. "All right, let's get you to that car before the day's over." As they headed back toward the house, both felt the tug of secrets left unsaid. They'd shared moments of trust, but the gap between their worlds loomed larger with every step. In the quiet of that early afternoon, the question echoed: how much truth could they handle before everything unraveled? The sun hung high over the ranch as Jeremy returned from driving Charlotte to retrieve her car by Clearwater Lake. Instead of parting ways, they ended up talking for hours, parked beside the tranquil water. She admitted she wasn't ready to go back to her world of conferences and formal dinners, and he confessed how the ranch's debts kept him awake at night. The raw honesty surprised them both, forging a deeper connection that neither had expected. When they finally pulled up to the ranch house in her sleek SUV, Marie came out, wiping her hands on a towel. Her wide-eyed gaze flicked between the expensive vehicle and Charlotte's uncertain smile. "You two took a while," Marie teased, arching an eyebrow. "Hope you had a nice drive." Charlotte laughed, trying to hide the swirl of emotions inside her. "We stopped for lunch," she said simply, not revealing the deeper heart-to-heart they'd shared. Jeremy stood beside her, feeling an unspoken bond forming. "Charlotte's thinking about staying in the cabin a few more days," he said. "Might swing by to help her with any outdoor questions." Marie shot him a knowing grin. "I bet." Charlotte shifted from one foot to the other. "Actually, I thought I could learn more about horses. Maybe help around here if you want an extra set of hands." Marie's smile softened. "We never turn down help, especially from someone who's not afraid to get a little dirty." With that, she offered Charlotte a warm pat on the shoulder. The afternoon sun shimmered on the corrals, and Charlotte found herself walking alongside Jeremy toward the barn. Inside, the scent of fresh hay and aged timber wrapped around her. Horses nickered softly, their eyes curious. She paused in front of a stall where a russet mare studied her. "This one's Penny," Jeremy said, stroking the mare's muzzle. "She's a bit skittish around strangers, but if you're gentle, she'll warm up." Charlotte extended her palm, and Penny sniffed it warily before nudging her wrist. A small thrill ran through Charlotte. "She's beautiful," she whispered. Jeremy lifted a saddle onto a wooden rack. "You ever ridden before?" She flushed, remembering some childhood lessons at a fancy stable, but those days were full of polished saddles and pristine arenas, nothing like the rugged authenticity of this place. "A bit, but not like this." He gave her a thoughtful nod. "We can fix that." They spent the next hour brushing Penny, talking softly so she'd grow comfortable with Charlotte's presence. The conversation meandered between gentle instructions about horse care and moments of deeper curiosity about each other's pasts. Charlotte carefully sidestepped mentioning her family name or the sheer scale of her inheritance, but she let slip details of her corporate responsibilities. Jeremy noticed how her face tightened each time she alluded to her life back in the city. "That must be a lot of pressure," he said gently. She offered a half smile, eyes drifting away. "Sometimes it feels like I'm wearing a mask. People see me as this resource or an asset instead of a person." He frowned. "Must be lonely." A flicker of vulnerability crossed her features, but she nodded. "I never imagined how liberating it could be just to talk with someone without all that baggage." Jeremy couldn't help the warmth that spread through his chest. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you found your way up that mountain." Their eyes locked, a subtle current of understanding passing between them. Then Jeremy cleared his throat, turning back to Penny. "Tomorrow, if you're up for it, we can saddle her and go for a short ride." Charlotte felt her heart flutter. "I'd love that." By late afternoon, they ventured outside to find Marie stacking bales of hay with a determined expression. She paused long enough to shout, "Jeremy, you better not be hogging all the help. These bales won't stack themselves." He shot Charlotte a playful look. "Duty calls." They joined Marie, and soon Charlotte was awkwardly lifting one side of a bale while Jeremy grabbed the other. Her arms trembled from the weight, but a sense of satisfaction filled her with each bale successfully stacked. This was real, tangible work, nothing like navigating corporate board meetings where empty words flew around polished tables. When they finished, Charlotte wiped sweat from her brow, feeling an odd mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Marie handed her a water bottle. "Not bad for a newbie," she teased. Charlotte grinned, downing the water in grateful gulps. She realized her phone was buzzing again in her jacket pocket, likely her stepmother or the board. The sense of obligation weighed on her, but she ignored it for the moment. Jeremy noticed the buzz. He didn't say anything, but his gaze held questions. She offered a small shrug. "It can wait," she said softly. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the fields in warm amber, Charlotte hopped into her SUV and drove back to the cabin. The memory of the day's work and the closeness she felt to Jeremy lingered like a comforting echo. She caught herself smiling at the thought that she'd be back tomorrow, ready to learn more about riding and see him again. Yet, beneath that glow of anticipation, a quiet worry stirred. The world she'd left behind wouldn't vanish. Sooner or later, she'd have to confront her real identity and risk shattering the fragile trust blossoming between them. Early morning fog clung to the edges of the ranch as Charlotte pulled up, dressed in jeans and a flannel shirt. Jeremy stood near the paddock, hands tucked into his jacket pockets, breath forming clouds in the crisp air. A smile tugged at his lips as she approached. "You're getting comfortable in ranch gear," he remarked, nodding at her boots. "Looks good on you." She felt heat rise to her cheeks but laughed softly. "Less chance of ruining expensive shoes," she joked, careful not to hint at just how expensive her wardrobe could be. Jeremy led her toward Penny's stall. The mare pricked her ears and gave a soft nicker of recognition. Charlotte's heart fluttered with excitement. She'd barely slept, anticipation coursing through her at the thought of learning from Jeremy. "First rule," he said, handing her a brush. "Let her know you're here to help, not to rush." Charlotte ran the brush along Penny's flank, speaking in low, soothing tones. As she did, Jeremy explained bits of horse psychology, how animals sense intention, how trust is earned through consistent kindness. His voice was gentle yet assured, reminding her of someone who truly understood the land and its creatures. Once Penny was groomed, Jeremy demonstrated how to saddle her, each step deliberate. Charlotte tried to follow his instructions, fumbling slightly with the cinch. He placed his hands over hers, guiding her movements. The closeness made her pulse jump, and for a moment she found herself breathing in the faint scent of leather and his soap. "All set," he murmured, stepping back. "You ready?" She nodded, swallowing nerves. "Ready." Mounting up, she found her balance, grateful for Penny's calm demeanor. Jeremy led them out of the paddock, and they set off at a slow walk across a stretch of open field. The sun was rising behind the barn, casting long shadows. "You okay?" he asked, glancing over his shoulder. "Feels a little wobbly," she admitted, gripping the reins with caution. "You'll get the hang of it," he said, voice laced with encouragement. "Just trust Penny to do her job and keep your body relaxed." As they ambled through the pasture, Charlotte focused on the sound of the horse's hooves and the gentle sway in her seat. It was strangely hypnotic. The distant silhouette of pine-covered hills drew her gaze, and she felt an unexpected wave of gratitude for this moment. For once, she wasn't a name on a corporate letterhead. She was just a woman learning to ride. Jeremy rode alongside on another horse named Rusty, occasionally calling out pointers. After a while, he fell quiet, letting the calm seep in. When they reached a slight incline, he halted. "Feel like taking a short gallop?" Her eyes widened. "A gallop." "I'm barely comfortable at this pace," He chuckled. "We can go slow, but you'll never get used to it if you don't try." She chewed her lip, then nodded. "All right. Go easy on me." He clicked his tongue, urging Rusty into a light canter. Penny followed with a jostling motion that made Charlotte's heart leap. She clung to the saddle horn, trying to find a rhythm. A burst of exhilaration rushed through her, mingling with a hint of panic. Slowly, she adapted, letting the horse's movement guide her body. They slowed to a walk again after a short stretch, Charlotte laughing in relief. That was amazing, terrifying, but amazing. Jeremy's grin was wide, genuine. "Told you, nothing like it." They continued riding, eventually reaching a gentle creek that shimmered in the early sunlight. They dismounted, letting the horses sip from the cool water. Charlotte's legs trembled a little when her feet touched the ground. "You did great," Jeremy said, rubbing Penny's neck. "Not many first-timers would handle that canter so smoothly." She let out a long breath. "Thank you for trusting me and for teaching me," he shrugged, suddenly bashful. "You're a natural, really." A comfortable silence settled as they leaned against a gnarled willow tree, horses grazing nearby. Charlotte found herself wanting to share more, to tell Jeremy about her father's death, about how her stepmother had been pushing her into corporate roles she never asked for. But fear held her back. She couldn't predict how he'd react. Would he judge her for being part of some faceless empire that owned half the state? Instead, she asked about the ranch's history, letting him open up. He spoke of his father's dream to expand, the heartbreak of financial woes, the relentless effort to keep the land. His eyes glowed with memories, but his voice betrayed a quiet despair beneath the surface. She listened intently, wishing she could offer more than sympathy. After a while, he cleared his throat and stood. "We should head back before Marie wonders what happened to us." She exhaled, nodding. They mounted up again and made their way home. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and earth, and Charlotte felt a swell of emotion she hadn't known in years, the sense that she belonged, if only for a fleeting moment. Evening cast long shadows across the ranch as Charlotte lingered for dinner at the Walkers'. It was a simple meal, chili and cornbread. Marie insisted that Charlotte sit while she bustled around the small kitchen, simultaneously stirring pots and chatting with Jeremy. The siblings bickered playfully about the best way to season the chili. Charlotte offered to help with the dishes afterward, and Marie nodded gratefully. "I won't say no to an extra pair of hands," she joked. Soon they stood side by side at the sink, warm water running, the windows open to let the cool night air in. With a sidelong glance, Marie asked, "So, how are you enjoying ranch life?" Charlotte smiled, dipping a plate into the soapy water. "I love it. It's real." "Honest?" Marie nodded thoughtfully. "That's how Jer and I feel too. It's not easy, but yeah, it's honest." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Look, I'm not trying to pry, but I can see you're not just another traveler passing through. Something's weighing on you." Charlotte's breath hitched. She glanced at Marie, seeing genuine concern in her eyes. "You're right," she admitted softly. "My life back home is complicated. I just needed a break." Marie turned off the faucet, wiping her hands on a towel. "Hey, I don't need details, but if you ever want to talk, I'm here." Tears threatened to rise, but Charlotte blinked them away. "Thank you," she whispered. Later that night, as the stars glimmered overhead, Charlotte found herself standing on the wooden porch. Jeremy was there, leaning against a post, arms folded. The moonlight etched his features in soft silver. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked quietly. She shook her head. "Too many thoughts spinning around." He studied her face. "Look, it's not my place to meddle, but I can tell something's got you twisted in knots." She walked closer, resting her hand on the porch railing. The wood felt solid under her palm, grounding her. "Have you ever felt torn between what people expect you to be and who you really are?" He let out a low chuckle. All the time. Folks around here expect me to save the ranch, keep up appearances, carry on my dad's legacy, like I'm some invincible cowboy who can do it all alone. She searched his gaze, hearing the strain in his voice. That's a heavy burden. He shrugged. It is, but I don't have much choice. I can't let my sister down. They fell silent, crickets humming in the distance. Then Charlotte took a slow breath. Jeremy, there's something I need to tell you. Her voice trembled slightly. I'm not just some office worker or a typical city girl. My family, we own a lot of property, more than I can even wrap my head around. It's a huge responsibility, and I've been trying to escape it. He frowned, not fully understanding. How much property are we talking? She swallowed hard. My last name is Richardson. My father was Henry Richardson. Jeremy's eyes widened in recognition. Henry Richardson was practically legend in the state, a real estate tycoon and businessman. Wait, are you saying... Charlotte nodded, her gaze dropping. I'm an heiress, Jeremy. My family's holdings stretch all across the state. My father bought up land, built companies, everyone knows the name, and I'm the direct heir, whether I want to be or not. The weight of her confession hung in the cool night air. For a moment, Jeremy didn't speak. Then he cleared his throat. That's a lot to process. She forced a hollow laugh. Tell me about it. He rubbed the back of his neck. So, you came here to get away from all that? Yeah, she whispered. I just wanted a place where people didn't see the fortune, the name, where they saw me. He studied her, taking in the vulnerability on her face. I guess you got more than you bargained for, nearly got eaten by a wolf, met a broke cowboy. Jeremy, she cut in gently, you saved my life out there. I don't want to lie to you or keep secrets, but I don't want to be treated differently either. He exhaled, stepping closer until the space between them felt charged with unspoken feelings. I don't know how to handle all that big money talk. But I know who you are out here, someone who works hard, laughs easily, and hasn't run from a challenge yet. Hope flickered in her eyes. So, you're not going to treat me like some outsider? He gave a half smile. If you keep mucking stalls and stacking hay, I'd say you're part of the team. Tension uncoiled from her chest, replaced by a soft warmth. She glanced at the sky, where stars burned bright and constant. Thank you. He hesitated, then reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. For a moment, they just stood there, the night breeze stirring hair and shirt sleeves. No words were needed. The simple closeness said enough. Finally, she squeezed his hand gently. Guess I should try to sleep. Tomorrow's another day of ranch chores, right? He nodded, bright and early. She turned to go inside us, but paused at the door. Looking back over her shoulder, she caught his eye. The unspoken promise of understanding, and maybe something more, lingered between them. Morning broke with a chorus of birdsong and the soft glow of dawn. Charlotte woke feeling lighter, as if sharing her secret had peeled away a layer of self-imposed armor. She joined Jeremy and Marie for breakfast, noticing the affectionate smile Marie shot her brother's way. Clearly, something had shifted in the house's atmosphere. I'll take the south field, Jeremy announced, sipping coffee. We've got a gate that's off its hinges. Marie nodded. I'll check the water lines. Charlotte, you up for more horse duty, or you want to explore? Charlotte set her mug down. I thought I could help Jeremy. I'm getting the hang of this place. Marie tried, and failed, to suppress a knowing grin. Okay, Ms. Ranch hand, he's all yours. The two of them headed out, each carrying a toolkit. The early sunlight caught the specks of dust swirling in the air, and the scene felt almost cinematic in its simple beauty. As they walked, Charlotte asked, Do you think anyone in town suspects who I really am? Jeremy shrugged. Small town folk notice newcomers, but nobody's mentioned anything to me. Most probably just assume you're a friend or tourist. Relief fluttered in her chest. She knew it was only a matter of time before someone recognized her name. Richardson was hardly obscure, but for now, anonymity remained intact. When they reached the south field, Jeremy showed her the broken gate. Together, they pried off bent nails and replaced rusted hinges. Charlotte's hands got filthy, and the sun made her forehead bead with sweat, yet she felt a sense of accomplishment each time the gate lined up properly. "You're pretty handy for someone who, owns half the state," Jeremy teased gently. She rolled her eyes, though a small laugh escaped. Yeah. Don't get used to it." They fell into a companionable silence. The only sounds the thud of the hammer and the occasional rustle of breeze through tall grass. Charlotte marveled at how normal this felt, working side by side, sharing a smile when their eyes met. She wondered if it could ever last. A distant rumble drew her attention. Looking up, she saw a sleek black SUV raising dust as it barreled down the dirt road toward the ranch. Jeremy followed her gaze, frowning. "We don't get many fancy cars out here." Her stomach tightened. A wave of dread rose inside her. Sure enough, the SUV parked in front of the ranch house, and a tall, impeccably dressed woman stepped out, Miriam Richardson, her stepmother. Even from a distance, Charlotte recognized the stiff posture and poised expression. "Oh no," Charlotte muttered. Jeremy glanced at her. "Someone you know?" She nodded, heart pounding. "That's my stepmother. She must have tracked my phone or something." They hurried back, tension coiled in Charlotte's gut. Miriam stood on the porch, scanning the property with a critical eye. The moment she saw Charlotte, her lips curved into a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Charlotte," Miriam said in a tone that feigned warmth, "I've been so worried you weren't answering calls." Charlotte forced a polite nod. "I needed space, some time away." Miriam's gaze flicked over Jeremy, his dusty jeans, sweat-stained shirt. Disapproval flashed across her features. "Yes, well, your presence is required back in the city. Board members are asking questions. There's a merger on the table, and we need your input." Charlotte felt Jeremy's curious stare, but she focused on Miriam. "I'm not leaving right now." Miriam arched an eyebrow. "Don't be childish, dear. We have responsibilities." A spike of anger ignited in Charlotte's chest. "I know my responsibilities, but I need a few more days. I've met people here, and I'm helping on this ranch." Miriam's gaze swept the surroundings again. "This ranch?" She flicked her attention to Jeremy. "And you must be... what, the caretaker?" Jeremy's jaw tightened. "Jeremy Walker. I own this land with my sister." Miriam offered a polite but dismissive nod. "Ah, I see. Well, Charlotte, we really must go. Please collect your things." Charlotte glanced at Jeremy, seeing the confusion and hurt flicker in his eyes. "I'm not ready," she repeated, voice trembling. "I'll come back soon, but not today." Miriam exhaled in frustration, pulling a folded piece of paper from her purse. She handed it to Charlotte. "This is the contract you need to sign. The lawyers are waiting. If you won't leave now, at least look it over." Charlotte took the paper, her hand shaking. She knew this was important, probably worth millions, but her heart pounded with defiance. "I'll review it," she said stiffly. "You can go." Miriam's glare could have cut glass, but she pivoted gracefully on her heel and returned to the SUV. Moments later, the engine roared, and the vehicle disappeared in a cloud of dust. A heavy silence fell on the porch. Jeremy's gaze was locked on Charlotte, who clutched the paper. She swallowed hard, tears stinging her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He stepped closer, confusion etched on his features. "Why are you apologizing? She managed a trembling sigh. Because I'm not sure how to bridge the gap between our worlds, and I'm terrified I'll lose what we've started here before it even has a chance. Miriam's visit cast a shadow over the ranch. Word traveled fast in a small town, and by the next morning, rumors churned in the local diner and feed store. Charlotte was some bigwig heiress, cozying up to Jeremy for reasons unknown. A few neighbors whispered about the wolf attack hero, as they now called him, rescuing a mysterious millionaire. Suddenly, the tight-knit community buzzed with curiosity and speculation. Jeremy tried to ignore the gossip. He threw himself into chores, mending fences and repairing a leak in the barn roof. But the tension weighed on him like a physical presence. Every time he went into town for supplies, he felt the prying eyes. "Heard you've got royalty staying at the ranch," someone would joke, but underneath lay a genuine fascination and a hint of jealousy. Charlotte noticed the shift too. She'd driven in for groceries and sensed the stares, overheard snatches of whispered conversation. Though she'd grown up in the public eye, it hurt to see people judge her motives. She retreated further into the ranch work, waking early to feed the horses and staying late to help Marie with the books. Marie had set up a makeshift office in the living room, sprawled with papers and receipts. One late afternoon, Charlotte joined her, scanning spreadsheets. "This is the ranch's budget," she asked, eyebrows knitting. "It's tight." Marie released a harsh laugh. "That's the polite way to put it. We're scraping by on short-term loans and credit. We might have to sell off a chunk of land if something doesn't change." A pang of empathy hit Charlotte. She wanted to offer financial help, but the memory of Jeremy's pride stopped her. "Is there another option? Investors, maybe?" Marie shrugged. "We tried, but investors don't see a huge profit in a small family ranch. And Jeremy won't compromise on certain things. He wants to keep our father's vision alive." Charlotte understood that ache to honor a parent's legacy. She gently reached for Marie's hand. "I'm sorry." Marie managed a faint smile. "It's not your fault. We'll figure something out." Then her eyes flicked to the contract Charlotte had left on the table, which bore the Richardson Holdings logo. "What about that? Could you buy us out or something?" The question made Charlotte's chest tighten. "Technically, yes, but that would change everything. Jeremy wouldn't want me to swoop in and fix things with money. And my family, my stepmother, would turn it into a corporate venture. We'd lose." "Everything that makes this place special," Marie sighed. "I see your dilemma, but if you don't sign that contract, what happens to your own inheritance and responsibilities?" Charlotte stared at the folded document, feeling trapped. "It'll sit in limbo. Miriam will push for a final decision, and eventually the board will force my hand. But I'm not ready to just be that person again." They lapsed into silence, each lost in tangled thoughts. Eventually, Charlotte rose, deciding she needed air. She walked out onto the porch, where dusk had settled across the fields. Jeremy was there, arms resting on the railing as he watched the fading light. He heard her step behind him and spoke without turning. "Marie filled you in on the finances, I guess." She nodded, stepping to his side. "Yeah." He turned to look at her, eyes weary. "I hate it. The idea of selling land, it's like losing a piece of my dad. But we're running out of options." She searched his face, heart aching at the strain etched in every line. "Jeremy, maybe there's a way—" "No!" He cut her off, gently but firmly. "I don't want you to feel like you have to rescue us. That's not why we—" She laid a hand on his arm. "I know. Believe me, the last thing I want is to undermine your pride or your dreams. But if I can help in some way that keeps the ranch intact, wouldn't that be worth considering?" He hesitated, conflict flashing in his eyes. I don't know how to accept that. And I don't know how my sister would feel, or the rest of the town." She placed her other hand over his. "I'm not looking to buy your land or turn this place into some showpiece. I just care about you, about both of you, and want to see you succeed." His breath caught at her earnest tone. For a moment, they stood there in the soft glow of the porch light, the hush of evening surrounding them. Then he pulled away slightly, gaze drifting toward the fields. "Let's give it some time," he said quietly. "We'll figure this out together, but maybe not all at once." Relief and longing swirled inside her. All right. Time. They walked back into the house, where Marie had just finished packing the ledgers away. "I'm going to turn in," she said, yawning. "Long day tomorrow," Jeremy nodded. "Night, Marie." Charlotte stepped forward. "Thank you for letting me help with the finances. I learned a lot." Marie's smile was warm, if tired. "We're glad you're here." Her eyes flicked between Jeremy and Charlotte before she disappeared down the hall. Alone again, they hovered in the living room. A lamp illuminated the worn couch and the battered guitar leaning against the wall. The tension from earlier lingered, but so did a sense of unspoken hope. Charlotte exhaled, running a hand through her hair. "I should head back to the cabin." Jeremy nodded, walking her to the door. As she turned to go, he stepped forward, brushing a light kiss against her cheek. The contact was brief, but it sent a rush of warmth through her. She looked up into his eyes, a quiet question there. He just smiled, a mixture of uncertainty and gratitude. "Drive safe," he murmured. Outside, the night air felt cooler than before, or maybe her face was just flushed. She climbed into her SUV, heart pounding with a swirl of conflicting emotions, determination, fear, and a burgeoning love that both thrilled and terrified her. Morning light streamed through the ranch house windows, a soft glow touching the worn furniture and dusty countertops. Jeremy stood at the stove, frying eggs while Marie skimmed through the mail. Across the kitchen table, Charlotte quietly sipped her coffee, her mind churning with yesterday's confrontation. Marie blew out a breath, tossing a letter onto the table. "More overdue notices," she muttered, her frustration showing in the pinch of her brow. "Utilities, feed costs, it never ends." Jeremy shut off the burner and slid scrambled eggs onto a plate. "I'll call the bank again. Maybe they can grant us a short extension." Charlotte cleared her throat. "What if I help with that? I have some contact." Jeremy held up a hand, voice firm yet gentle. "Let me try first. If it gets worse, we'll talk." Marie caught Charlotte's eye, offering an empathetic smile, but tension crackled just beneath the surface. They all knew how precarious the ranch's situation was. The contract in Charlotte's purse felt like a physical weight. She hadn't signed it, but ignoring it forever wasn't an option. After breakfast, Jeremy took his phone to the porch to make the difficult call. Charlotte could hear his low murmur, the tone growing more clipped with each response. When he finally returned, he dropped onto a chair, exhaling slowly. "They gave us a week," he announced, trying to sound optimistic. "But that's it. After that, they'll move forward with a foreclosure notice." A heavy silence followed. Marie bowed her head, rubbing her temples. Charlotte laced her fingers together in her lap, guilt and fear swirling inside her. She yearned to fix everything with a stroke of her pen, but Jeremy's pride and her own complicated feelings held her back. Marie finally stood. "I'll go into town, see if I can sell some of our older equipment. Maybe that'll buy us another month." Jeremy nodded, not meeting Charlotte's gaze. "I'll check on the west pasture, make sure nothing else is falling apart." As they scattered to handle their tasks, Charlotte felt a familiar ache, the sense that something was slipping through her fingers. She grabbed her jacket and followed Jeremy outside. "I'll come with you," she offered softly. He paused, the set of his jaw relaxing. "I appreciate that." They rode together in his creaking pickup, passing fields that showed the strain of a tough season, patchy grass, uneven fences. Charlotte stared at the land, heart twisting. If the ranch fell into foreclosure An unknown developer might scoop it up and turn it into a subdivision or a luxury resort. The thought sickened her. "You said you wanted to talk about possible solutions," Jeremy said abruptly, keeping his eyes on the road. "I'm listening now." Charlotte steadied her breath, choosing her words carefully. "I want to help financially, but not as some outsider swooping in. Maybe we can form a partnership, a private agreement that keeps the ranch in your name but gives you the capital to pay off debts." His grip on the steering wheel tightened. "And what would you want in return?" Her cheeks warmed. "Nothing major, maybe a small share in any future profits, but mainly just the satisfaction of seeing this place thrive." Silence followed, broken only by the rumble of the engine. Finally, he exhaled. "I'm not comfortable taking charity." "It's not charity," she pressed gently. "It's an investment. In you, in Marie, in the future of this land. And yes, it helps me too. If I can show my stepmother that I'm capable of real business decisions, ones that aren't about corporate greed, maybe I can steer my family's empire in a better direction." He glanced at her, brow furrowed. "So, you'd leverage your position in Richardson Holdings to funnel money here?" She shrugged, a little self-conscious. "I can use my share of the trust. It's my inheritance. I'm free to invest it as I see fit, within reason." He cut the engine as they arrived at the west pasture. The truck idled a moment before sputtering off with a final rattle. Jeremy stepped out, scanning the fence line. "All right," he said, his voice tense. "I'll think about it. That's all I can promise right now." She nodded, understanding the complexity of what she proposed. "Thank you." They spent the next few hours walking the perimeter, checking posts and wires. The day was bright, but the wind carried a bite that hinted at the coming winter. Clouds moved across the sun, sending fleeting shadows over the fields. It all felt like a metaphor for their uncertain future, moments of clarity followed by looming doubt. Jeremy hammered in a loose nail, sweat beading on his temple. "You know," he said quietly, "people in town are talking. They're calling me foolish, letting an heiress do ranch chores like a hired hand." Charlotte kneeled to tighten a wire. "Does that bother you?" He tossed the hammer into the truck bed with a clang. "Part of me doesn't care, but another part worries about you getting hurt by their gossip." She straightened, dusting off her gloves. "I'm used to rumors, Jeremy. As long as I know who I am and who you are, that's enough." A flicker of gratitude lit his eyes, but before he could respond, a roar of an approaching engine caught their attention. A county truck rumbled up, pulling to a stop beside them. A man in a uniform hopped out, tipping his hat. "Mr. Walker, ma'am," he greeted. "Just giving you a heads up. We've had more wolf sightings near the property line. Keep an eye on your livestock." Charlotte's heartbeat spiked, the memory of that day in the mountains flashing across her mind. Jeremy thanked the man, who handed over a leaflet with wildlife safety tips before driving off. "Guess we'd better keep the fences secure," Jeremy murmured, adrenaline tightening his jaw. Charlotte nodded, swallowing hard. "No more close calls." He offered a tight smile. "Not if I can help it." They climbed back into the pickup, tension thrumming between them. The wolves were back, the bank was breathing down their necks, and time was running out. Every problem seemed to circle, closing in from all sides. The next morning brought an unwelcome surprise. Marie, face pinched with worry, burst into the living room where Charlotte was folding laundry. "You need to see this," she said, waving a local newspaper. "Front page." Charlotte took the paper and saw the headline in bold letters, "Heiress Charlotte Richardson, secret plans for our town." Beneath it, a grainy photo showed Charlotte stepping out of her SUV near the ranch. The article speculated about her motives, suggesting she might be scouting property for a massive corporate development. Jeremy came in from the porch, eyes narrowing as he saw the paper. "What is this nonsense?" Marie threw up her hands. "Small-town journalism, fueled by gossip. They're stirring people up, saying you're here to buy out farmland and turn the place into a tourist resort." Charlotte's stomach dropped. "That's the last thing I want." Jeremy's jaw tightened. "I know that. But do they?" Marie pointed to a paragraph. "They even mention how the ranch is in financial trouble. The article claims you're swooping in to rescue it, only to flip it later for a profit." Charlotte felt a surge of anger and helplessness. "I never said anything like that. Who would even leak this story?" Marie shrugged. "No idea. Could be someone from the bank or a busybody who overheard a conversation." Jeremy set the paper aside, gaze locked on Charlotte. "We can't let this stand. Let's go talk to the editor. Demand a retraction." Charlotte forced a steady breath. "I'll do it. I need to address these rumors head on." He nodded. "I'll go with you." Within an hour, they were walking into the modest office of the local newspaper. A young receptionist gulped at the sight of Charlotte, clearly recognizing her from the published photo. Moments later, the editor, a wiry man with thinning hair, emerged. He forced a polite smile. "Ms. Richardson, Mr. Walker, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Charlotte clenched the newspaper in her fist. "This article is full of misleading assumptions. I'm not here to buy out farmland or turn this town upside down." The editor raised his hands defensively. "It's not personal, Ms. Richardson. We're just reporting what we've heard." Jeremy took a step forward, voice taut. "Heard from who?" The editor shrugged, clearly uncomfortable. "We have our sources. People worry when an influential figure arrives under mysterious circumstances. They fear losing their way of life." Charlotte could feel her frustration boiling. "I get that, but you published speculation as fact. Do you realize the damage you're causing? Businesses might refuse to deal with Jeremy. Locals might resent me for something I'd never do." He sniffed, shifting from foot to foot. "We're a small operation. We rely on tips from the community. If you have a statement, we can print it." She held his gaze. "Fine. Then print this. I have no intention of building anything here. I'm not buying up farmland. I'm here on personal leave to help a friend and learn about ranch life. Period." The editor jotted it down, nodding. "All right, we'll run a follow-up piece tomorrow, but you know how folks can be. Rumors have a life of their own." Jeremy let out a slow breath, controlling his temper. "We're done here." They left the newspaper office, stepping into the bustling main street. Already, Charlotte noticed sideways glances from passers-by. A shopkeeper who used to greet Jeremy with a friendly wave turned away, muttering under her breath. The tension felt tangible. "Let's get out of here," Jeremy said, voice tight. "No point hanging around." They climbed into Charlotte's SUV, a silent heaviness filling the cabin. She gripped the steering wheel, feeling the weight of the stairs and the headlines. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I never wanted to bring this chaos." Jeremy placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's not your fault. Ignorance breeds fear. We'll deal with it." When they reached the ranch, Marie awaited them on the porch, brow furrowed. "You two okay?" Jeremy shrugged. "The editor will run a retraction, but the damage is done. Town's buzzing with rumors." Marie set her lips in a thin line. "People are already cancelling orders for horse feed or grazing deals, worried about corporate takeover. It's ridiculous." Charlotte sank onto the porch swing, the wooden slats creaking beneath her. The day was bright, but a storm of anxiety churned in her mind. She had come here to escape pressure, to find authenticity, and now she was at the center of a different kind of turmoil. Jeremy sat beside her. "We'll keep doing our work. People will see the truth in time." She nodded, but her heart felt heavy. "We're running out of time," she murmured, recalling the bank's ultimatum. And if we lose the ranch? Marie folded her arms, eyes flicking between them. Maybe we should consider your partnership idea, Charlotte, before everything falls apart. Jeremy and Charlotte exchanged a tense glance. She reached into her jacket pocket, touching the edge of her own contract, the one Miriam had forced on her. 2 agreements, one that could save the ranch, one that bound her to the family empire, and neither felt simple or safe. In that moment, a profound sense of dread settled over them, like a gathering storm cloud. The ranch was under siege from all sides: wolves, banks, rumors. And beneath it all lay an unspoken fear. Even if they managed to save the ranch, would their fragile trust survive the weight of these outside forces? The storm broke sooner than anyone anticipated, figuratively and literally. Rain clouds gathered overnight, unleashing a torrential downpour that turned the ranch's dirt paths into slick mud. The roof sprang leaks in 3 different spots, sending Jeremy and Marie scrambling to set out buckets and tarps. Charlotte arrived in her SUV at dawn, tires skidding through the muck. She hurried to the house, drenched by the time she reached the porch. Inside, she found Jeremy wrestling with a soaked tarp near the fireplace, frustration etched in his features. "I'll grab towels," she offered, darting into the kitchen. She returned moments later, pressing them into his hands. "Let me help." Together, they managed to secure the tarp under a major leak. Water drummed against the plastic, but at least the flow into the living room slowed. In the corner, Marie rifled through a closet for more buckets. "Could this day get any worse?" Marie muttered, wincing as another drip splashed onto her shoulder. Fate answered her question with cruel timing. Jeremy's phone buzzed on the coffee table. He snatched it up, eyes narrowing. "It's the bank," he said grimly, accepting the call. Charlotte and Marie watched anxiously as he paced, voice taut. "But you said I asked for—" "Fine." He hung up, shoulders sagging in defeat. "What happened?" Marie asked, alarm rising in her voice. "They're pulling the extension," Jeremy said, sounding hollow. "Apparently, some new acquisition deal forced them to clamp down on risky loans. They're filing the foreclosure notice tomorrow." Marie staggered, pressing a hand to her chest. "Tomorrow? That's no time at all." Charlotte felt a cold wave of dread. This was worse than she'd imagined. "Jeremy," her voice trembled, "we can still do something." He stared at the floor, fists clenched. The only thing left would be to pay off the debt in full or negotiate a miracle sale in less than 24 hours. The weight of his words settled like a boulder in the living room. Rain hammered the roof, echoing their mounting despair. Suddenly, headlights flashed across the window. Charlotte glanced outside, heart sinking as she recognized Miriam's SUV pulling up. A knock sounded at the door moments later. With a resigned expression, Charlotte opened it. "Hello, darling," Miriam said, stepping in with a pristine umbrella. She gave a cursory glance at the damp interior, nose wrinkling. "Rough weather, I see." Charlotte bit back a retort, leading her to where Jeremy and Marie stood. Miriam offered a tight smile, ignoring the tension. "I came to deliver a message. The board wants an answer. Charlotte, now." Charlotte let out a shaky breath. "You picked a bad time." Miriam arched an eyebrow, feigning sympathy. "I can see that. But sometimes adversity speeds up decision-making. We're prepared to finalize your inheritance share, which is substantial enough to handle, well, nearly anything." Jeremy cut in, voice edged with anger. "So you show up to wave money in our face, hoping we'll jump at it." Miriam gave him a cool stare. "I don't know why you're so hostile. I'm offering a lifeline. Sign the contract, Charlotte, and all this," she gestured vaguely around, "can be taken care of." Charlotte's hands shook. She looked at Jeremy, saw the devastation in his eyes. The ranch was on the brink of collapse. Marie's gaze pleaded with her, as if torn between loyalty and desperation. The house itself dripped with the storm's fury, a fitting reflection of their emotional state. At last, Charlotte spoke, voice quivering, and in return, I have to commit to the board's plan, which might mean expansions, developments, possibly even turning farmland into corporate projects. Miriam offered a small shrug. We move where the market goes, dear, but your father's legacy is safe. We'd simply continue to grow. Charlotte closed her eyes, a barrage of images flooding her mind, the simple dignity of Penny the horse, the rolling fields at sunrise, Jeremy's proud stance as he worked the land. It all felt irreconcilable with her family's hunger for bigger profits. I can't, she whispered at first, then firmed her voice. I won't sign away everything I value. This ranch deserves better than being another asset on our balance sheet. Miriam's lips thinned. Then you leave me no choice. The board will push through without you. You'll lose any say in how your inheritance is invested. Tears threatened to well up as Charlotte realized the depth of the ultimatum. If she didn't sign, she'd relinquish control of her fortune to Miriam, who might then buy the ranch or, worse, let it be destroyed through other deals. The sense of powerlessness crashed over her like a tidal wave. Jeremy placed a hand on Charlotte's shoulder, his voice hollow. We can't let pride destroy everything. She looked at him, tears brimming. What are you saying? He swallowed hard, defeat etched in every line of his face. Sign it. At least you'll have the funds to pay off the loan and keep the ranch from the bank. Maybe we can figure out the rest later. Miriam's eyes gleamed. A wise choice, but Charlotte felt her heart shatter. She'd sworn she wouldn't surrender to the machine that was Richardson Holdings. Now, with no time and no options, she was about to compromise all her ideals. She reached for the pen Miriam held out, her hand trembling so violently she could barely grip it. Torn between saving the ranch and staying true to herself, she hovered over the dotted line. Her mind screamed in protest, yet the reality of foreclosure loomed like a guillotine. Finally, she closed her eyes, pressed the pen down, and signed. In that instant, something inside her felt lost, like a vital piece of her soul slipping away. Thunder rumbled overhead, shaking the walls. Miriam's satisfied smile only deepened the sense of impending doom. The storm raged on through the night, an endless downpour that turned the ranch yard into a swamp of ankle-deep mud. Charlotte lay awake on the living room couch, hugging a pillow to her chest. Every time lightning lit the windows, she was reminded of the decision she'd made. She'd signed the contract, effectively binding her to the corporate empire she despised. Jeremy paced the hallway, restless. Marie had tried to talk to him, but he brushed her off, consumed by guilt and regret. Finally, he stopped by the couch and spoke in a hushed tone. You should rest. Charlotte's voice trembled. I can't. My head won't stop spinning. He sat on the edge of the coffee table, elbows on his knees. We did what we had to, right? Now we can pay the bank before foreclosure. She stared at him, tears threatening. Yes, but at what cost? I just gave Miriam the power to direct my father's legacy. She could do almost anything with it. Jeremy's gaze fell. I wish there'd been another way. But we were cornered. She sniffed, tears slipping free. I feel like I betrayed myself, and I hate that you felt forced to push me toward it. His shoulders slumped. We're stuck in a storm we didn't create. He reached out, gently placing a hand over hers. But we'll fix it eventually. She tried to find comfort in his touch, but the hollow ache in her chest only deepened. Outside, thunder rumbled like a distant roar of judgment. Hours later, just before dawn, the rain finally eased to a drizzle. Charlotte couldn't stay inside any longer. She slipped on boots and a jacket, heading out into the grey morning. Puddles shimmered in the faint light, and the ranch buildings looked battered by the relentless storm. She walked aimlessly, eventually finding herself at the barn. The door creaked as she pushed it open, revealing the soft knickers of the horses. Penny stood in her stall, damp from the leaks in the roof, ears perked at Charlotte's arrival. Charlotte stroked the mare's muzzle, tears slipping unchecked now. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the horse, as if Penny could sense her turmoil. "I wanted to protect this place, but I might have just set wheels in motion that lead to more destruction." Behind her, a soft voice spoke. "This ranch has survived worse storms than last night." She turned to see Marie, hair damp and eyes swollen from lack of sleep. "Couldn't rest either?" Charlotte asked, voice raw. Marie shook her head. "Not really." She came closer, placing a hand on Penny's flank. "I know it wasn't easy to sign that contract. I also know my brother and I owe you more than we can say." Charlotte swallowed. "Don't. If the board decides a year from now that this land is prime for development," Marie squeezed her arm, "that doesn't mean we can't fight back when the time comes. If you're inside the company, you have a seat at the table. You can resist from within." Charlotte let out a shaky breath. "I hadn't thought of it that way, but do I have enough power to stop them?" Marie's gaze was steady. "I believe you do. But only if you believe it too." A glimmer of hope sparked in Charlotte's chest, though it felt fragile as a newborn foal. She nodded, pressing her lips together. "I can try, but I'm so tired, Marie. Tired of fighting expectations, tired of letting people down." Marie wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "You're not letting us down. The fact that you stayed and fought for this ranch, for us, means more than you'll ever know." Charlotte leaned into the embrace, letting the warmth soothe her battered emotions. Penny nudged them both, as if insisting on her share of comfort. Later, they emerged into the pale morning light, determination kindled in their eyes. Jeremy waited on the porch, phone in hand. "Just got off with the bank," he said, voice subdued. "I told them we have the funds." "They're sending the paperwork." Charlotte nodded. "Let's get it settled. Then I guess I have to go deal with the board. Miriam wants an immediate meeting." Jeremy hesitated, glancing between them. "That means you'll be leaving the ranch for a while." She inhaled, steadying herself. "Yes, I need to face them, to show I'm not just rolling over." He stepped closer, tentatively clasping her hand. "I'm sorry for how everything turned out. But I'm grateful, too." She tried to smile, though her eyes glistened with tears. "I know, we'll figure it out." They stood there in the damp aftermath of the storm, unity mingling with sorrow. The ranch was safe from foreclosure, for the moment, yet the cost weighed heavily on all of them. Dark clouds still lingered on the horizon, as if warning that the hardest battles were yet to come. 2 days later, Charlotte drove away from the ranch in a bittersweet haze. The fields lay behind her, a patchwork of muddy green recovering from the storm. Jeremy stood by the fence, arms folded, watching her taillights fade. Neither had slept well since signing the papers. Now they faced the consequences of that desperate decision. Charlotte arrived in the city by late afternoon, navigating bustling streets that felt cold and impersonal compared to the ranch's open skies. Her reflection in the glass doors of the Richardson Holdings building seemed like a stranger, hair pulled back in a neat twist, wearing a tailored suit she'd fished out from the back of her SUV. Steeling her courage, she entered the lobby and took the elevator to the boardroom on the top floor. Miriam was waiting inside, flanked by senior board members. The room's long conference table gleamed under fluorescent lights, a stark contrast to the cozy warmth of the Walker Ranch. Charlotte's stomach churned at the eager looks and polite smiles. She could practically smell the ambition. "Charlotte, darling," Miriam greeted, gesturing to a seat beside her. "We're pleased you could join us." Charlotte forced a nod, taking her place. The board chairman, a grey-haired man with sharp eyes, cleared his throat. "Now that you've signed the contract, we can finalize the distribution of your father's assets. Congratulations on your new role, she offered a tight smile. Thank you. I intend to be involved in every major decision going forward. An awkward silence greeted her statement. Miriam's lips curved in a condescending grin. Of course, you'll have a voice in the direction we take. The chairman tapped a stack of folders. We've scheduled a series of meetings to discuss expansion opportunities. There's a particular region with prime farmland that could be developed into... Charlotte's heart pounded. If you're referring to the county near Redwood Falls, I won't allow it to be bulldozed for condos or strip malls. My father believed in responsible growth. Several board members exchanged uneasy glances. Miriam pursed her lips. We're not bulldozing anything yet, but we must look at all profitable possibilities. Charlotte summoned every ounce of resolve. Profit isn't our only measure of success. We have to consider the environment, the local communities. A board member interrupted, sounding exasperated. We've been over this, Ms. Richardson. Emotions don't drive business. Her cheeks burned. That's exactly the mindset I want to change. We can innovate, not just exploit. A tense standoff ensued, with murmurs rippling down the table. Finally, Miriam raised a hand. Let's not get bogged down in arguments. Charlotte, since you're so passionate, why don't you present a proposal at next week's meeting? Show us how you'd balance community interests with profitability. Charlotte's heart fluttered, part excitement, part terror. I'll do that, she said, voice steady. Don't expect me to be a figurehead. I'm here to reshape Richardson Holdings from the inside. Miriam's eyes flickered with something akin to grudging respect, or perhaps calculation. Very well. Meeting adjourned. As the board members filed out, Charlotte lingered in her seat, mind racing. She'd stepped into the lion's den, determined to fight for a more ethical approach. But the weight of corporate inertia felt immense. She texted Jeremy, "Meeting over. They want a proposal. I'm going to try to protect your region and others like it." His response was quick. "Proud of you. Ranch is behind you 100%. She sighed, warmth blossoming in her chest at his words. For all the heartbreak, she wasn't alone in this struggle. That night, she retreated to her city penthouse, a stark, minimalist space she seldom visited. Surrounded by silent walls of glass and steel, she felt oddly claustrophobic. She called Marie for an update, relief flooding her when she learned the loan payment had gone through. The ranch was safe from immediate threat. Yet more challenges loomed. If her proposal failed, the board might push for expansions near Redwood Falls. Eventually, even Jeremy's ranch could be in their crosshairs. Determined not to succumb to despair, Charlotte pulled out a notepad and began sketching ideas. A sustainable model for farmland investments, programs to help ranchers modernize without selling out. She recalled every conversation with Jeremy, every struggle Marie described. If she could merge real-world ranch knowledge with corporate power, maybe she could shift the tide. Hours passed in a blur of research and notes, her laptop open to articles on regenerative agriculture and community-based land trusts. When exhaustion finally caught up with her, she slumped onto the couch, phone in hand. She typed a message to Jeremy, "Wish you were here. Miss you." His reply came a minute later, a brief flicker of comfort in the neon-lit night. "Me too." Keep fighting, clutching the phone to her chest. She let her eyes close. The city thrummed outside, vibrant and relentless, as if mocking her longing for the wide-open fields. But she refused to waver. She'd broken into this new phase of her life, caught between corporate responsibility and rural ideals, and there was no going back. Standing at the window, she gazed at the glittering skyline, letting a spark of determination light her eyes. Yes, she had signed under duress, but she would use every loophole, every ounce of leverage to protect the land she'd grown to love, and the man who had shown her what real courage meant. For the first time since that dreadful storm, She felt the faint stirrings of hope. This was her chance to shape a different future, not just for the ranch, but for everyone impacted by her family's sprawling empire. And despite the darkness of the past few days, she sensed a turning point ahead. Thunder still echoed in Charlotte's mind, even though she was back in her city penthouse, surrounded by the quiet hum of traffic far below. She sat at her dining table, laptop open, papers strewn everywhere. On the screen, a half-finished proposal blinked accusingly. She'd promised the board a plan, one that balanced profit and community well-being, but her ideas still felt raw. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jeremy. "Ranch is holding steady. Rain stopped. Fields drying. Miss you." She exhaled, relief and longing merging in her chest. This was for him, for Marie, for the land that had awakened something real inside her. With renewed determination, she hammered out section after section of her presentation. She wrote about soil regeneration, renewable energy for ranch operations, fair partnerships with local suppliers. It was ambitious but grounded in the practical knowledge she'd gleaned from the walkers. Hours later, her eyes burned from staring at the screen. She leaned back in her chair, pressing her palms over them. A soft knock on the door startled her. She wasn't expecting anyone. Rising, she padded across the tiled floor and opened it. To her surprise, her stepmother, Miriam, stood there, holding a sleek leather folder. "I knew you wouldn't answer my calls," Miriam said with a faint smile, stepping inside uninvited. "So I came in person." Charlotte frowned. "What do you want? I'm busy." Miriam slipped off her coat, draping it neatly over a chair. "I'm here to discuss the board meeting. I have the updated agenda." She paused, gaze sweeping across the messy table. "You've certainly been hard at work." Charlotte crossed her arms. "Yes, I have. I promised a plan, and I intend to deliver." Miriam eyed the scattered notes. "And you truly think the board will accept all this?" Her tone dripped skepticism. "Responsible ranching, forging alliances with small operations. It's not our usual style." Charlotte's jaw tightened. "I'm aware, but times change. We can't keep doing business like we're the only ones who matter." Miriam raised a placating hand. "I'm not here to fight. In fact, I admire your passion. Your father would have liked it too, but you must be realistic. Investors expect returns. If you propose radical shifts, you risk alienating them." Charlotte stood taller. "I'll show them there's profit in sustainability. If I fail, then so be it. But I won't give up without trying." Miriam studied her, then opened the leather folder, revealing a glossy portfolio. "This is the preliminary design for the Redwood Falls area if we move forward with development, commercial zones, upscale housing, maybe a resort." Charlotte's heart clenched. "You can't be serious. That land belongs to ranchers who'd be priced out or forced to sell." Miriam's expression softened just a fraction. "We stand on the edge of opportunity. You have a voice now, so use it at the meeting. If you can't convince the board to embrace your ideas, Redwood Falls won't stay farmland for long." With that ominous note, Miriam handed her the folder and left. Charlotte stared at the images of manicured golf courses and rows of identical cottages. It felt like a gut punch, the complete antithesis of what Jeremy and Marie were fighting for. She sank into a chair, pressing her palm against her temple. "I can do this," she told herself, forcing her breath to steady. "I have to." Just then her phone rang, Jeremy's voice on the other end. "Hey," he said, warmth in his tone. "Wanted to hear you, see how you're holding up." She swallowed the lump in her throat. "I'm working on the proposal. It's going to be an uphill battle." "I know," he replied, "but if anyone can do it, you can. Remember, you're not alone." Her eyes stung with tears she refused to shed. "I wish you were here." Silence hung for a moment. "I'll come if you need me," he offered, sincerity radiating through every word. Part of her ached to say yes, but she knew the ranch still needed him. "Thanks," she whispered. "For now, let me handle the city. You take care of our home." A soft chuckle. "Our home, huh?" She paused, realizing the slip. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Feels like it." They spoke a few minutes more, trading small encouragements. By the time she hung up, her resolve was bolstered. She opened a fresh document, labeling it clearly, "Sustainable Future, a proposal for Richardson Holdings." With every keystroke, she pictured the ranch, the horses, the rolling fields, and the honest sweat of daily labor. She owed it to them, and to herself, to protect what they'd built. That night, she barely slept, but when morning light broke across the skyline, her presentation outline was complete. She detailed short-term profitability strategies, long-term environmental gains, and real partnerships with local communities. Whether the board would listen remained to be seen. Still, as she clicked save, she allowed herself a trembling smile. She was no longer the runaway heiress searching for meaning. She was Charlotte Richardson, someone who knew the value of humble, hard work. And she had a plan. Charlotte arrived at the Richardson Holdings boardroom early. She dressed in a crisp navy suit, hair pinned into a low bun, determined to project both confidence and approachability. Her laptop bag felt weighty with the printed copies of her proposal. One by one, board members trickled in. Some offered polite nods, others avoided her gaze. Miriam entered last, accompanied by two senior executives whispering behind closed lips. With everyone seated around the gleaming table, the chairman called the meeting to order. "First on the agenda," he began, adjusting his glasses, "Ms. Charlotte Richardson's presentation regarding sustainable development strategies." Charlotte stood, taking position at the head of the room. She connected her laptop to the projector, breathing slowly to calm her nerves. "Thank you all for being here," she began. "I'd like to propose a new approach for our land investments, one that balances profitability with community partnerships." She clicked through slides, detailing how small ranches could be supported to produce premium goods, how ecotourism could thrive without displacing local families, how public-private initiatives could secure grants and tax incentives. The terms sounded technical, but her voice carried the passion of someone who'd seen the land firsthand. At first, the room was quiet, some members scribbling notes, others tapping their pens, but as she delved deeper into potential revenue streams, a few eyebrows rose. She concluded with a photograph of open fields at sunrise. She'd taken it from Jeremy's ranch and left the image glowing on the screen. "We have a chance," she said softly, "to lead in ethical, sustainable growth rather than repeating the same models that leave communities fractured." Silence settled. Then one board member, a stern-faced woman, cleared her throat. "Ms. Richardson, this is ambitious, profitable in the long term, perhaps, but the immediate returns might be underwhelming." Charlotte nodded. "True, but I've outlined bridging strategies to secure early revenue. This approach requires patience, but the payoff is more stable." A man near the end of the table scoffed. "Patience? Our shareholders want quarterly gains." Charlotte bristled but kept her tone civil. "We can show shareholders that a steady, resilient model outperforms volatile, short-sighted projects." She paused, glancing at Miriam. "And we avoid alienating local communities. Reducing public outcry and lawsuits also protects our brand." At that, several heads nodded, acknowledging the PR benefit. Miriam tapped a manicured nail on the table. "Charlotte, how do we handle Redwood Falls? The location is prime for lucrative developments. Your plan suggests minimal disruption, but we have early agreements in place for expansions." Charlotte forced herself to stand tall. We renegotiate, offer farmers better lease terms, help them modernize, develop small-scale tourism that preserves ranching heritage. The CFO, a grey-haired man with a meticulous air, raised a hand. You're talking about rewriting entire contracts. That could be costly. She took a breath. Change is costly, but losing community trust is worse. We can't afford more negative headlines. Our brand's taken hits in the past year. An uneasy murmur ran through the room. The chairman cleared his throat. Let's not rehash old PR issues. We need a decision. Miriam leaned forward, gaze fixed on Charlotte. You've given us plenty to consider. Let's put it to a preliminary vote. Who's in favor of drafting a pilot program based on Charlotte's proposal? The tension crackled. Slowly, a few hands rose. The CFO hesitated, then added his. Others kept their hands down, uncertain. Finally, Miriam raised her own hand. Charlotte's heart skipped. She hadn't expected that. She scanned the room, seeing about half the members in favor. Motion passes by a narrow majority, Miriam announced, turning to the chairman. We'll draft a pilot program. Charlotte, you'll work with our legal team to adapt the Redwood Falls project accordingly. Charlotte swallowed hard, relief and lingering fear battling inside her. She'd won a tentative victory, but she knew the real fight lay ahead. Negotiating details, ensuring the board didn't gut her proposal behind closed doors. Meeting adjourned, the room emptied. Miriam approached, arms crossed. Don't celebrate yet. They'll watch like hawks for any sign this is unprofitable. Charlotte nodded, pulse thudding in her ears. I understand. Miriam gave a slow nod, then surprised Charlotte by placing a hand on her shoulder. You presented well. Your father would be proud. Just be careful, all right? Not everyone in this room wants you to succeed. Charlotte's chest tightened with a swirl of conflicting emotions. Thanks, she managed, voice faint. Exiting the building, she stepped onto the busy sidewalk, the city's cacophony enveloping her. A sense of triumph warred with a nagging awareness that this was only the beginning. Pulling out her phone, she called Jeremy. The line clicked, his warm drawl answering, "Hey there, how'd it go?" She closed her eyes, letting his voice soothe her. They approved a pilot plan, but it's delicate. I'll have to keep a close eye to make sure they don't sabotage it. Jeremy's laughter held a note of pride. That's my girl. When are you coming back? Her heart leapt at the casual claim. Soon, she promised. First, I need to meet with legal, draft the pilot program, but I'll be home as soon as I can. Home, he echoed, the word filled with meaning. We'll be waiting. She ended the call, gazing up at the towering skyscrapers. The wheels were in motion. Redwood Falls had a fighting chance, and so did the ranch, but she could almost feel the shadowy resistance gathering behind the scenes. If she faltered even once, everything she'd built could crumble. The next week became a whirlwind for Charlotte. From dawn until late night, she bounced between legal teams, project managers, and strategic planning sessions. She argued for preserving farmland buffers, ensuring ranchers retained water rights, and capping any commercial developments to a modest scale. Every clause was a battle. Some of the attorneys rolled their eyes at her idealistic demands, but she held firm. At night, she would slump into her penthouse, exhaustion radiating through every muscle. Her only solace came in video calls with Jeremy, where he'd show her a new foal born on the ranch, or walk her through the fields at sunset so she could hear the birds. In those moments, the city walls seemed less suffocating. Midweek, she met Miriam for lunch at an upscale restaurant. It was a polished, sterile setting with marble floors and gentle piano music drifting overhead. Miriam sipped a sparkling water, watching Charlotte pick at her salad. You look drained, Miriam remarked, not unkindly. This is harder than you expected, isn't it? Charlotte mustered a tight smile. Yes, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. I'm ready to see it through. Miriam tapped her manicured nails on the table. The Redwood Falls pilot draft is nearly complete, but some of the board members are concerned about potential losses. Charlotte's grip tightened on her fork. We have to accept shorter profits in year one. It's how we establish goodwill and stable partnerships. Miriam tilted her head. And if the pilot fails, if ranchers don't honor their contracts, or if environmental factors push costs too high. Charlotte's mind flashed with the image of the ranch battered by storms. She took a breath. We adapt. We won't abandon them just because it's not instantly profitable. A faint ghost of a smile crossed Miriam's lips. You really are Henry's daughter. Always wanting to preserve the human element. Charlotte looked away, pushing a stray piece of lettuce around her plate. It's the only reason I'm here. They finished lunch, an uneasy truce hanging between them. As Charlotte left, she couldn't shake the feeling that Miriam was testing her resolve, and might be planning contingencies if Charlotte's approach stumbled. That evening, as she reviewed contract language for the 10th time, her phone buzzed. Jeremy's voice was urgent. We had another wolf sighting near the cattle pens. Nothing major, but it's spooking folks again. Charlotte's heart kicked up. Was anyone hurt? No, we scared them off. But it reminds everyone how vulnerable we are. Some locals blame you, claiming that more outsiders are encroaching, messing with the balance of nature. She sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. That's ridiculous. But I know rumors spread quickly. Jeremy paused, a note of tension in his voice. We also got a letter from some real estate scout, claiming they have interest in purchasing parcels near our ranch. Offers way above market price. Charlotte's stomach tightened. Do you think it's connected to the Redwood Falls development rumors? Could be. People see the slightest hint of development and start sniffing for profit. Anger flared. I'll do everything I can to stop that. This pilot plan is supposed to protect ranchers, not invite speculators to tear them apart. Jeremy's voice softened. I believe you. Just come home soon, okay? People need to see your face, hear your voice, that you're on their side. She swallowed the knot in her throat. I will. Let me finalize these contracts, then I'll drive back. Promise. When she hung up, she stared at the city lights outside her window, a swirl of emotions tightening in her chest. Wolves, real estate vultures, and skeptical board members. It felt like the walls were closing in from all directions. She forced herself to return to the legal documents, determined not to let fear derail her. By the time the final draft of the Redwood Falls pilot landed on her desk, she'd fought for every line, every clause that honored local ranchers' rights. The next morning, the board convened to sign off. Charlotte stood at the head of the table again, distributing the documents. She watched anxiously as each member flipped through, scanning the content. One man scowled. There's a mandatory review after 6 months. What if the farmers haven't held up their end? Charlotte tapped the page. Then we address it, but we don't gut the entire agreement. We believe in collaboration, not one-sided terms. A woman frowned. This ties our hands on certain types of commercial development. That's the point, Charlotte countered. We build responsibly. The chairman cleared his throat, casting a wary glance around. All right, we agreed to a pilot. Let's finalize it. He signed. Others followed suit. Finally, Miriam placed her elegant signature on the dotted line. It was done. Charlotte exhaled, a wave of relief washing over her. She'd secured official backing for Redwood Falls, at least temporarily. She refused to be naive. There would be pushback and scrutiny. But for the moment, she'd won a significant victory. Gripping the signed document, she felt an urge to leave the city immediately, to rush back to the ranch and share the news. As she gathered her papers, Miriam approached, arms folded. "I hope this pilot meets your expectations," her stepmother said in a guarded tone. "Because if it fails, the board will come after you hard." Charlotte's eyes flicked to Miriam's. "Then I'll make sure it doesn't fail." Miriam studied her a moment longer, then gave a curt nod. "Good luck, Charlotte." She turned and strode away. Despite the tension, Charlotte sensed a faint respect behind Miriam's words, as if mother and daughter stood on opposite shores of a turbulent river, each acknowledging the other's will. Clutching the documents, Charlotte stepped out of the boardroom, heart pounding with a mix of triumph and dread. She'd set the stage for a bold experiment. Now she had to make sure Redwood Falls succeeded, or risk losing the ranch altogether. Charlotte's SUV rumbled onto the familiar dirt road leading to the Walker Ranch under a blazing afternoon sun. The stormy skies of the previous week had given way to a stretch of clear blue. She felt lightheaded with anticipation and a subtle fear. What if the pilot plan wasn't enough? What if the ranchers refused to trust her? Pulling up by the barn, she noticed Jeremy guiding a skittish mare into a corral. He glanced over his shoulder, a slow smile transforming his features when he saw her. "Look who's back," he called, voice warm. She hopped out, rushing to his side. Without hesitation, he pulled her into a dusty, sweat-scented hug. She buried her face in his shoulder, relief coursing through her. "I missed you," she murmured. He stroked her hair. "Welcome home." The word home struck her deeply. She stepped back, a grin breaking across her face. "I have news. The Redwood Falls pilot is official. We signed all the documents." Jeremy's eyes lit with cautious optimism. "So you did it?" She nodded. "It's only the first step, but at least we have backing. Now it's about rolling it out and proving it works." He chuckled, taking off his hat and running a hand through his hair. "You're amazing, you know that." Before she could respond, Marie came bounding out of the house. "Charlotte, you're back." She practically tackled Charlotte with a hug. "Is it true? The board approved everything." Charlotte nodded, still catching her breath from the enthusiastic greeting. "Yes. We have to show real results in 6 months, or they could pull funding, but at least we're on the right track." Marie whooped, jumping in excitement. "Then let's celebrate tonight. I'll cook something special." They spent the afternoon tending to chores side by side. Charlotte noticed fresh repairs on the barn roof and improved fences. Jeremy and Marie had worked tirelessly. Some of the neighbors who'd once been standoffish waved from a distance, a hint of curiosity and cautious acceptance in their gazes. However, not everyone was friendly. While Charlotte and Jeremy delivered feed to a nearby field, a pickup truck rolled up, the driver glaring. "So you're the big-shot heiress, huh?" he barked. Charlotte tensed, but Jeremy remained calm. "She's helping us secure better terms for ranchers," he said evenly. The man spat on the ground. "Helping? Don't see how letting suits from the city walk all over us is helping." Charlotte held up a placating hand. "I understand your worry, but this pilot plan is meant to prevent forced sales and heavy development. We're trying a different approach," he snorted. "I'll believe it when I see it." With a wave of dismissal, he revved the engine and drove off. Jeremy exhaled slowly. "There'll always be skeptics." Her stomach knotted. "I know. We just have to prove ourselves." They returned to the ranch, where evening settled in shades of pink and gold across the sky. Over dinner, a hearty stew Marie had cooked, they talked about next steps. Charlotte needed to organize a community meeting with local ranchers, explaining how the pilot program would work. They'd need cooperative buy-in, signatures, maybe committees to oversee distribution of resources. Marie let out a mock groan. "Sounds like a lot of meetings." Charlotte grinned. "It does, but hopefully I can convince folks it's worth the effort." She set down her spoon, turning to Jeremy. "I'll need your help. People trust you." He smiled wryly. They'll trust me more than a corporate name. Sure, let's do it together. After cleaning up, they moved to the porch, where crickets sang in the twilight. The stress of the city ebbed from Charlotte's shoulders with each passing minute. She found herself holding Jeremy's hand under the soft glow of a single porch light, their fingers intertwined. "Do you think we have a real chance at changing things?" she asked quietly, eyes on the star-flecked sky. He squeezed her hand. "I do. You've already changed me, changed how I see possibilities. That's half the battle right there." She leaned her head on his shoulder, heartbeat steady and warm. A gentle breeze rustled the fields, and for a fleeting moment, everything felt right. No bank breathing down their necks, no board members plotting. Just them, the ranch, and a shared dream of building something lasting. But as she closed her eyes, a distant howl shattered the moment. A wolf. She tensed, instinctively glancing toward the dark tree line. Jeremy frowned. "They're bolder than ever this season. We'll set up some deterrents near the cattle pens tomorrow." Marie appeared behind them, arms folded, concern in her gaze. "Let's not take any chances." The tension returned, a reminder that the ranch was always at risk, whether from nature, finances, or human greed. Charlotte swallowed, feeling the weight of responsibility settle again. Yet as she clutched Jeremy's hand, she sensed a budding hope inside. Together, they might stand against every threat. A week later, Charlotte stood in the town's small community center, nervously adjusting her blazer. A handful of ranchers filed in, some looking curious, others openly skeptical. Folding chairs were arranged in haphazard rows near a simple wooden stage. Jeremy was already up front, chatting with a couple of familiar faces. Marie hovered at the back, greeting newcomers. This was the first official gathering to introduce the Redwood Falls pilot. Charlotte had spent days organizing pamphlets, charts, and a clear agenda, determined to be transparent. She only hoped the locals would listen. When the clock struck 7, Jeremy stepped to the microphone. "Evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. My name's Jeremy Walker, and many of you know me. I'm here with Charlotte Richardson, who's championed a program to help us keep ranching strong and local. She'll explain the details." A quiet murmur passed through the crowd. Charlotte approached the mic, her heart hammering. She offered a nervous smile. "Thank you, Jeremy, and thank all of you for being here. I know there's been talk and worry that large corporations plan to swallow up farmland. My goal is to prevent that." She outlined the pilot plan, from low-interest loans and grants to ranches for infrastructure upgrades, to guaranteed purchase agreements that shielded them from volatile market prices. She emphasized that her family's company wouldn't seize property. Instead, they'd partner with locals to create shared profit models. At first, the room remained tense, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. But as she fielded questions about potential hidden fees, about land rights, about who truly held power, she calmly referenced the contract's clauses and promised ongoing oversight. Slowly, arms uncrossed, heads bobbed in cautious agreement. However, not everyone was swayed. Midway through the Q&A, a heavy-set man in a worn flannel jacket stood, voice booming. "We've heard promises before. Folks come in, say they'll help, and next thing we know, we can't afford our own land." Charlotte's chest tightened. "I understand the fear. I've seen firsthand how that happens. But this pilot is designed so you remain in control. If Richardson Holdings violates any terms, you can pull out without penalty." He eyed her suspiciously. "And what about expansions? You city folks always want more, bigger, shinier things." She paused, meeting his gaze. "We're capping growth to small-scale ecotourism and sustainable agriculture. No mega resorts or sprawling subdivisions. That's in writing." He pursed his lips, then finally sat. "I'll believe it when I see it," he muttered, echoing another rancher's words from earlier. But at least he didn't storm out. Jeremy stepped up beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Look, I've known Charlotte a while now. She's not in this for a quick buck. She's put her neck on the line with her own company to protect our way of life." The sincerity in his voice carried weight. A few people nodded, exchanging glances. One older woman raised a hand. "If Mr. Walker trusts her, that counts for something," she said simply. Relief flickered through Charlotte. She wrapped up the meeting with clear steps on how ranchers could sign up or learn more. By the end of the session, a small line formed at the front to take application forms and ask additional questions. She recognized some from Jeremy's property lines, others from neighboring counties. Hope stirred in her chest as she saw fear giving way, albeit slowly, to cautious optimism. When the crowd thinned, Jeremy caught her eye, a proud smile tugging at his lips. Marie bustled over, collecting leftover papers. "You did great," she said softly. "They're tough, but you broke through." Exhausted yet buoyed, Charlotte exhaled. "I'm just glad they were willing to listen. Now we have to deliver." They helped the community center's manager stack chairs and clean up. Outside, night had settled, the sky a swirl of stars. The air felt cool against Charlotte's flushed cheeks. Jeremy walked her to her SUV, hands in his pockets. "I'm impressed. Public speaking's not easy, especially when half the room's convinced you're the enemy." She laughed, tension draining from her shoulders. "I think we won a few hearts tonight. That's a start." He leaned against the side of her vehicle, face lit by the weak glow of a nearby street lamp. "How soon do you think the pilot's going to start?" She shrugged. "We can finalize sign-ups within a month. Then funds should be released for improvement shortly after. If we show progress in 6 months, the board will likely expand the program." He nodded thoughtfully, then reached out and took her hand. "Thank you for doing this. I know it's bigger than just me, but it means a lot." She squeezed his fingers, warmth blooming in her chest. "I'm doing it for us, and for everyone who needs a better way." They stood there, the night humming with cricket song and the distant rumble of a pickup truck heading home. A faint howling in the distance sent a shiver up Charlotte's spine. Wolves again, a reminder that threats lurked, whether from nature or corporate corridors. Yet in that moment, she felt a surge of determination. They were forging a new path, a delicate, perilous one, but real. She lifted her gaze to Jeremy's, finding comfort in his steady presence. "We'll make it work," she said firmly. His eyes shone with resolve. "Yes, we will." And as they embraced under the rural night sky, the faint hush of wind through the trees carried a promise. Their fight wasn't over, but they were far from alone, and that, perhaps, was the greatest strength they could have. The gentle warmth of early summer settled over Redwood Falls, transforming the once muddy fields into green pastures. At the Walker Ranch, life found a new rhythm. The community meeting had softened some wary hearts, and a handful of ranchers signed up for Charlotte's pilot program. Yet an undercurrent of tension buzzed through town. Cautious optimism mixed with murmurs that Richardson Holdings might still betray them. Charlotte balanced her days between ranch work and endless phone calls to corporate headquarters. She'd set up a small office in the Walkers' living room, her laptop perched on a hand-me-down desk. Marie teased her about turning the ranch into a high-tech command center, but the jokes were half-hearted. Everyone sensed bigger challenges looming. Late one afternoon, Jeremy found Charlotte hunched over spreadsheets, the glow of her screen reflecting worry in her eyes. He leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. "You look beat," he said softly. She rubbed her temples, forcing a tired smile. "Just wading through funding allocations. We're getting pushback from a few board members who say Redwood Falls is high risk and want to scale back the budget." "Typical," Jeremy muttered. "They can't see past their quarterly profits." She nodded. swallowing a swell of frustration. "I'll fight it at the next meeting, but I need concrete results to show them. If we don't prove the pilot is working, they'll slash our resources or kill it altogether." He stepped forward, resting a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We're making progress. I saw old man Harris out in the fields, already planning new irrigation lines with that small grant, and the Jones family is upgrading their cattle pens." She brightened a little. "That's good news. If we can show even a modest uptick in productivity, the board might back off." Jeremy's phone buzzed, drawing his attention. He frowned at the screen. "It's from a neighbor. Something about another suspicious truck prowling near the far side of the property." He glanced at her, concern etched in his features. "Might be real estate scouts again?" Charlotte felt a surge of anger. "They're like vultures. I'll come with you. Maybe we can figure out who's behind this." They drove out in the old ranch pickup, bumping along a dirt path framed by tall grass and scattered wildflowers. A late afternoon sun bathed the land in a golden hue, a stark contrast to the tension roiling inside. As they neared the boundary fence, they spotted a black SUV parked off to the side. Two figures in business attire walked the perimeter, scanning the property. Jeremy killed the engine and hopped out, Charlotte close behind. "Can I help you folks?" he called, voice firm. One of the men turned, surprise flickering over his face. "Oh, just admiring the view," he answered smoothly. Charlotte recognized the corporate posture, polished shoes, crisp suits, the faint air of entitlement. "This is private land," she said, crossing her arms. "Mind explaining what you're doing?" The second man, tall and lean, cleared his throat. "We're surveying potential investment opportunities. Didn't realize we were trespassing. Apologies." Jeremy's jaw tightened. "We'll ask you to leave, then." The men exchanged a look before shrugging. "Understood. We'll move along." They walked back to their SUV at an unhurried pace, as if the confrontation was a mere formality. Charlotte watched them drive off, unease twisting her stomach. "They're not done here. They'll be back." Jeremy exhaled. "Probably hoping to buy up parcels from owners who haven't signed on to your pilot. If they split the community, the entire plan might collapse." They returned to the truck, each lost in thought. Back at the ranch, they relayed the encounter to Marie, who frowned. "You think they're connected to someone on the board?" Charlotte considered the question. "Possibly, or just opportunists who smell profit. Either way, we need to warn our neighbors, remind them to hold tight and give the pilot a chance." That evening, the three of them drafted emails, made phone calls, and posted notices on local bulletin boards, urging ranchers to report any suspicious buyers. They emphasized that legitimate offers would come through the pilot program, not shady roadside deals. Exhausted but resolute, Charlotte closed her laptop close to midnight. Jeremy walked her out onto the porch, where the sky teemed with stars. A warm breeze carried the scent of hay and distant pines. The hush of the night reminded her of why she was fighting so hard. "You ever think about just giving up?" she asked softly, her voice wavering. He slid an arm around her. "Sometimes. But then I remember we've come this far. And I see you, pushing back at every obstacle. That's enough to keep me going." She leaned into his embrace. Despite the storm of doubts swirling in her mind, there was comfort in his steady presence. He was right. They'd come too far to turn back. The next few days, or weeks, would be critical for the pilot's survival. But together, they might weather whatever sabotage lurked in the shadows. A lone howl cut through the quiet, sending a chill down Charlotte's spine. The wolves were out there, reminding them of nature's raw power. But another, subtler predator prowled, wearing suits and smiling promises of easy money. Clutching Jeremy's hand, she gazed into the darkness, vowing silently not to let fear or doubt claim their progress. Charlotte opened her eyes to a gloomy dawn. Clouds pressed low over the ranch, promising another burst of rain. She tossed and turned all night, haunted by dreams of men in suits tearing up farmland, the horizon darkened by wolves howling. Shaking off the lingering dread, she rose to face another day of negotiations and phone calls. Marie greeted her in the kitchen with a mug of coffee. "Got an early start," she said, nodding at a heap of paperwork on the table. "Farmers are sending in their forms and expense lists for the pilot." Charlotte took a grateful sip. "That's good. The more who participate, the stronger our case to the board." Jeremy entered, yawning. "Heard from the bank again. They confirmed our last loan payment was covered by the pilot funds. That's a relief." Marie's eyes sparkled with cautious hope. "At least the foreclosure threat is behind us." They fell into a comfortable routine. Breakfast together, then splitting up tasks. Charlotte spent the morning in a corner of the living room, phone clamped to her ear. She reassured worried participants that the pilot was legit, answered questions about timelines, and scribbled notes on a notepad until her wrist ached. Shortly after lunch, she received an unexpected call from Miriam. Stepping out onto the porch for privacy, she answered, "Yes." Miriam's tone was cool. "We have an emergency board session this evening. One of our members claims you're funneling excessive resources into Redwood Falls at the expense of other projects. They want immediate clarification." Charlotte's pulse spiked. "Excessive resources? I'm following the pilot's approved budget. Who's making these accusations?" "Better you come and hear it for yourself," Miriam replied. "Boardroom, 7 o'clock. The line went dead. Charlotte lowered the phone, heart pounding. "They're trying to sabotage me from within." When she re-entered the house, Jeremy read the worry on her face. "What happened?" She explained the sudden meeting. "They're saying I'm misallocating funds. It's a lie, but they could twist it." He exhaled slowly. "You want me to come along for backup?" She managed a faint smile. "I doubt they'd let you into the boardroom, but knowing you're waiting might help." She packed a few files, kissed him goodbye, and set off in her SUV. The drive felt longer than ever, the sky growing darker as she neared the city. By the time she reached Richardson Holdings' towering building, a light drizzle had begun, mirroring her dread. Inside, she found the boardroom already buzzing with tension. Miriam sat at the head of the table, flanked by the CFO and several other members. The chairman's expression was grim. Charlotte took her seat, hands clammy. "All right," the chairman said, rapping his knuckles on the table. "We've heard allegations that Redwood Falls is receiving disproportionate funding. Mr. Richardson, care to explain?" Charlotte laid out her spreadsheets and official budget approvals. "Everything I've allocated is within the pilot's guidelines. We had unanimous sign-off on the sums, including from this board." A stern-faced man tapped a report with his pen. "We've been told some ranchers are getting new equipment at low cost, courtesy of Richardson Holdings. That's an expense the company shouldn't bear." Charlotte's temper flared. "It's a cost-sharing arrangement. Ranchers pay a portion. We match it with funds from the pilot's grant program. That's exactly what we agreed upon to encourage modernization." Murmurs rippled around the table. Another board member shrugged. "I don't recall the exact terms." Miriam cleared her throat, drawing all eyes. "The pilot does include modernization clauses, but there's concern about the pace and scope. Some argue we're overcommitting. Ms. Richardson, perhaps you could slow down the spending until we see initial returns." Charlotte swallowed her frustration. Slowing down now would sabotage the pilot. If ranchers don't have upgrades in time for the summer season, we miss the productivity window. That kills our data. A few board members looked uncertain. The CFO leaned forward. "We just want assurance that we won't sink funds into a project that never pays off." "You will see returns," Charlotte insisted, scanning the room. "We project a 2 to 3% profit increase by next quarter if these improvements go through. Long term, it grows exponentially." Silence stretched, tension thick as the drizzle outside turned to a downpour. Finally, the chairman sighed. "I suggest a compromise. We'll allow existing fund allocations to continue, but no additional expansions until we review next quarter's numbers." Charlotte bristled. "That means we can't sign on new participants." The chairman raised a hand. "Only for a short period. We want to mitigate risk." She realized it was the best she'd get tonight. "Fine. But if we see positive outcomes, you have to uphold the pilot's terms." Miriam nodded slowly. "Agreed, for now." The meeting adjourned, leaving Charlotte drained. Outside, rain battered the street. She stood under the building's awning, rummaging for her car keys. Miriam appeared at her side, holding an umbrella. "You did well, but you must tread carefully," her stepmother said, voice almost gentle. "Dissent is growing. If Redwood Falls doesn't turn a profit soon, the board could terminate the pilot and you." Charlotte's throat tightened. "I won't let that happen." Miriam nodded, her gaze flicking to the stormy skies. "I believe you, but you'll need more than determination this time. Good luck, Charlotte." As Miriam walked away, Charlotte stared into the rain, the city's neon lights reflecting on slick pavement. More than determination, she thought of Jeremy, of the community that placed its faith in her. The lines had been drawn. If the pilot faltered, Redwood Falls would be left to the wolves, both literal and figurative. She couldn't fail. Charlotte drove back to the ranch under a storm-lashed sky. Wind buffeted her SUV and thunder rattled the windows. She clenched the wheel, forcing her focus on the road. Thoughts churned. The board's partial concession, Miriam's warning, and the sense that time was running out. By the time she pulled up to the ranch house, the wind had died, leaving the land in a surreal calm. Lights glowed in the windows, and she spotted Jeremy pacing the porch. The instant he saw her, he hurried to meet her, worry etched in his face. "You took forever," he murmured, pulling her into a quick embrace. "Everything okay?" She winced. "Not exactly. The board agreed to keep current funds, but froze new sign-ups until they see profit." Jeremy shook his head. "Typical. They dangle hope, then cut it back." Before she could respond, Marie flung open the door. "You're back. There's trouble. Mr. Harris just called. Said he spotted wolves circling his calves again." Charlotte's heart dropped. The storm seemed never-ending. "We have to help him," she said, recalling the older rancher who'd eagerly signed onto the pilot. Jeremy grabbed his coat and a flashlight. "Let's go." Within minutes, they were bouncing down a muddy road toward Harris's ranch. The glow of a lantern illuminated the barn area. Mr. Harris stood by a makeshift pen, rifle in hand, his weathered face twisted with anxiety. "Got a few calves penned in here," he said, voice tight. "Saw eyes shining out in the dark. Could have been 2, maybe 3 wolves." Jeremy nodded, scanning the fence line. "We'll help you keep watch." "They might move on once they realize we're armed and alert." Charlotte, though uneasy about firearms, understood the necessity. She took up a position near Jeremy, flashlight in one hand. The night pressed in, heavy and silent. Every rustle of leaves set her on edge. Memories of the wolf attack she'd faced weeks ago surged back, adrenaline spiking. Minutes dragged by. The wind picked up again, a haunting whistle across the field. Then, a low growl. Charlotte's pulse hammered. The beam of her flashlight caught a pair of eyes glowing just beyond the fence. A flash of movement, grey fur slipping into deeper shadow. "There," Jeremy whispered, raising the rifle. He fired a warning shot into the ground, the noise echoing across the property. The eyes vanished. Mr. Harris let out a shaky breath. "Hope that scares them off." But a few tense moments later, another shape appeared on the opposite side, creeping closer. Charlotte's heart pounded as she realized the wolves were testing them, flanking them from multiple angles. She remembered the vicious teeth, the primal fury of her own encounter. But Jeremy's here, she told herself. We'll be okay. Shot after shot rang out into the air, warning blasts, not meant to kill but to deter. The howls grew fainter, and eventually the wolves retreated. By the time the men lowered their rifles, sweat coated Charlotte's palms, despite the cool air. "Thank you," Mr. Harris muttered, eyes still wide. I thought I could handle it alone, but they're getting bolder." Jeremy placed a reassuring hand on the older man's shoulder. "We'll figure out better deterrents, maybe some lights or a perimeter fence upgrade." Charlotte stepped closer. "We can use the pilot's funds for new fencing." "You're already enrolled, remember?" Mr. Harris nodded, relief flickering. "Hope that stays available. Heard rumors the board might yank the rug out." She forced a smile. "We're fighting to keep it in place. Don't lose hope." They helped him secure the calves in a sturdier barn, then drove back, tension thick in the cab. Jeremy stared at the road, voice taut. If the board cuts more funds, people like Harris won't stand a chance. The wolves and the real estate sharks will close in. Charlotte swallowed hard. "I know, I'm doing everything I can." She felt the crush of responsibility, the sense that every rancher's livelihood rested on her shoulders. Her mind buzzed with possible solutions, emergency expansions of the pilot, better fence subsidies. But each idea crashed into the board's new restrictions. They arrived at the Walker Ranch well past midnight, exhaustion weighing them down. Inside, Marie had stayed awake, waiting anxiously, hearing their story. She shook her head in frustration. "Every day, it's something new, isn't it?" Jeremy dropped onto the couch, running a hand over his face. "We're tired, but we can't stop. That's what the wolves count on, us letting our guard down." Charlotte sank beside him. "And the suits in the city are no different," she murmured. "They wait for a chance to snatch up land or shut down the pilot. The moment we slip, they'll pounce." Marie sat too, the three of them forming a small circle of shared determination. "So, we don't slip," she said softly. "We keep watch, we help the neighbors, and we show results." Silence settled, broken only by the distant patter of drizzle against the windows. In the flickering glow of a single lamp, their faces reflected exhaustion, but also resolve. They'd stand guard against wolves of every kind, no matter how many times they circled. Charlotte let out a long breath, pressing her hand over Jeremy's. "We'll make it through," she whispered, "and we'll do it together." He nodded, squeezing her fingers gently. For tonight, that promise was enough to keep fear at bay. 2 weeks later, the Redwood Falls pilot faced its first critical review. Charlotte had submitted preliminary data to the board, showing modest gains in milk production, crop yields, and local sales. She highlighted stories of ranchers like Mr. Harris, whose upgraded fences helped reduce livestock loss. Yet the board's response arrived via a terse email. "Progress insufficient. Consider broader consolidation or alternative developments." The blow felt like a punch to the gut. She'd known the numbers wouldn't be spectacular this early. But to call them insufficient seemed like a move to undermine her from the start. Without waiting, she called an emergency community meeting at the Walker Ranch. Cars and trucks lined the dirt road. Ranchers in boots and hats gathered in the barn, which Jeremy and Marie had cleared for seating. The scent of hay mingled with the tension in the air. Charlotte stood on a small wooden crate, hands shaking. She scanned the concerned faces, people looking to her for leadership. "Thank you all for coming," she began, voice echoing in the rafters. "I'll be blunt, the board isn't happy with our first round of data. They want faster, bigger returns. If we don't show an upward trend soon, they might pull out." A low rumble of discontent passed through the group. One rancher stood, hat in hand. "We did everything you asked, filled out forms, made improvements. We're already seeing benefits." Charlotte nodded. "Yes, and I believe in those benefits. But corporate executives aren't impressed by incremental growth. We need something more dramatic to sway them." Marie stepped forward. What if we coordinate a big product showcase? Invite the board to see our operations firsthand, taste the difference in local produce, see the healthy livestock. Jeremy added, we can stage a demonstration of the new fencing, the irrigation lines, show them how your funds were used, a real in-person tour. Murmurs of approval rose. Another rancher clapped his hands. Might be the only way they'll believe us. Charlotte forced a smile, hope blossoming. Then let's do it. We'll plan an open ranch day for the board in 2 weeks. We'll gather everyone's best produce, highlight improvements, and prove Redwood Falls is worth their continued investment. She ended the meeting on that determined note. Ranchers buzzed with excitement about showcasing their land, some volunteering to set up booths or demonstrations. As the barn emptied, a sense of unity hung in the air. They were no longer fearful individuals, but a collective ready to fight for their livelihoods. But privately, doubt gnawed at Charlotte. What if the board refuses to come, she worried, or they come, only to shut it all down anyway? She pushed the thoughts away. She had to at least try. That night, Jeremy found her in the living room, poring over schedules, invites, and logistical details. "Hey," he said softly, setting a cup of tea beside her. "You've been at this for hours." She rubbed tired eyes. "We have only 2 weeks. I need to finalize the guest list, arrange transportation, coordinate signage." He placed a gentle hand on her arm. "Breathe. This is supposed to be proof of success, not a chore. Let folks show their own pride. Don't do it all yourself." She exhaled, realizing she was on the brink of burnout. "You're right, delegation is key," he smiled. "I'll help, and so will Marie. The ranchers want to impress the board, so let them take charge of their own sections." She nodded, relief washing over her. "Thank you. I can't bear the thought of letting everyone down." Jeremy stroked her hair. "We won't let that happen." Days blended in a flurry of activity. Marie coordinated with local vendors to set up produce stands. Ranchers practiced livestock demonstrations, from milking displays to shearing sheep. Charlotte drafted personalized invitations to each board member, urging them to see Redwood Falls firsthand. Slowly but surely, plans took shape. In the midst of preparations, Miriam called. "I've seen the invitation," she said, voice inscrutable. "Some on the board think it's a waste of time." Charlotte's heart clenched. "And you? Do you think that—" A pause crackled over the line. "I think it's bold. But if you truly believe Redwood Falls can deliver, this might be your best shot." Charlotte latched onto that sliver of encouragement. "Then I'll expect you to attend." A faint exhale. "I'll be there." The eve of the event arrived with tense excitement. Ranchers finished last-minute improvements, tying ribbons to fences and polishing signs. Tables were set with fresh produce, cheeses, and jars of homemade preserves. A barbecue pit smoked in the distance, promising a feast. Charlotte stood on a slight rise overlooking the main staging area, dusk painting the sky in purples and reds. Jeremy joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. "Looks impressive," he remarked, eyes shining. She leaned into his side, inhaling the scent of hay and barbecue smoke. "It does." "I just hope the board appreciates it," he chuckled softly. "They'll see the value in this place, or they're fools." Lightning flickered far off on the horizon, a silent reminder that storms were never far away. But Charlotte lifted her chin, feeling a surge of optimism. Tomorrow was their moment of truth, the final stand to prove Redwood Falls deserved its chance. Whether the board accepted or not, she knew they had poured their hearts into this. And sometimes heart was all that mattered. As they headed back down to join the others, her mind spun with final details. Yet she felt oddly calm, buoyed by the unity around her. For once, she wasn't fighting alone. She had an entire community by her side, and that made all the difference. Morning arrived with a sweep of sunlit clouds, the air fresh and clear from a late-night drizzle. By 8 o'clock, the first board members began rolling in, sleek cars and SUVs navigating the gravel driveway. Dressed in suits and heels, they stepped out, eyeing the ranch with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Charlotte stood near the entrance, greeting them alongside Marie. She wore practical but neat jeans, boots, and a collared shirt, straddling her two worlds with poise. "Thank you for coming," she said to each arrival, offering a friendly handshake. The chairman arrived, glancing around with a polite nod. "Quite a setup, Ms. Richardson." She gestured to the rows of booths and displays. "We've prepared demonstrations to show exactly how the pilot funds were used. And the results." Miriam appeared next, stepping out of her town car in a tailored suit. She scanned the bustling scene with a guarded expression. "Impressive turnout," Charlotte swallowed, nerves jittering. "We're hoping to persuade you all that Redwood Falls is more than just numbers on a spreadsheet." A small crowd of ranchers had gathered under a banner reading, "Redwood Falls, growing together." As board members mingled, local families showcased their livestock, from sturdy cows to sheep with freshly shorn wool. Produced tables groaned under vibrant vegetables, homemade jams, and artisan cheeses. The aroma of barbecue drifted enticingly, courtesy of a few energetic volunteers cooking up a hearty lunch. Jeremy, in his best Western shirt, led smaller groups on guided tours to see new irrigation lines and fence installations. Charlotte overheard phrases like innovative method, increased yield, and less livestock loss, which made her heart soar. This was exactly the tangible proof the board needed. At midday, the crowd convened near a makeshift stage. Marie welcomed everyone, then handed the mic to Charlotte. Standing under the bright sun, Charlotte's heart hammered. She spotted Jeremy in the audience, arms crossed but smiling with quiet encouragement. "Thank you all for joining us," she began, voice clear. "The Redwood Falls pilot is about balance, investing in modern techniques while preserving our ranching heritage. You've seen how local families have used the funds to improve efficiency and reduce losses. Already, yields are up by a modest but steady percentage." A ripple of nods passed through the board members. She continued, "More importantly, this project fosters trust. Ranchers know we're not here to bulldoze their land. We're here to stand beside them, ensuring sustainable prosperity." The chairman stepped forward, glancing at his notes. "These are promising signs, Ms. Richardson, but some wonder if it's enough. We need assurance of long-term profitability." Charlotte's pulse quickened, but she met his gaze evenly. "Profit is vital, no one denies that. But stable, ethical profit outperforms a quick grab. Give us another quarter, and we'll expand these results. Redwood Falls can become a model for the entire state." Murmurs ran through the board. Miriam raised her hand. "I'm inclined to support an extension, provided we see a formal, itemized plan for scaling." Charlotte fought back a grin. "You'll have it by week's end." Applause erupted, first from the ranchers, then from a few board members who joined in. Relief flooded Charlotte's chest, and she allowed herself a moment to breathe, to let the tension dissolve. They were gaining traction. As the event wound down, the board members trickled out, many expressing surprise and admiration. "I'll be honest, I expected less," one admitted. "But this is impressive." Miriam offered a handshake that felt almost genuine. "Well done, Charlotte. Keep delivering, and Redwood Falls might become our flagship." With that, she climbed into her car and departed. Charlotte released a long, shaky breath, blinking back tears of relief. Jeremy sidled up beside her, voice low. "You did it! They're on board, at least for now." She turned, stepping into his open arms. The ranchers nearby cheered, apparently deciding to celebrate the moment too. Charlotte felt her cheeks flush, but she laughed, overwhelmed by joy. "We did it," she whispered. "All of us." Marie joined them, tearful and grinning. "I can't believe it. The pilot's safe." The ranch is safe. For a few precious minutes, the entire gathering became a swirl of handshakes, backslaps, and heartfelt thank yous. Children raced between booths, ranchers exchanged phone numbers with city officials, and the future felt alive with possibility. Later that evening, quiet settled over the Walker Ranch. The guests had gone, the booths dismantled, and the yard tidied. Stars appeared one by one, reflecting in puddles left by the morning dew. Charlotte walked with Jeremy to the far fence, the same spot where they'd once worried about looming financial doom. She leaned on the fence, gazing at the silhouettes of horses moving lazily in the paddock. "It's not over," she murmured. "We still have to prove ourselves next quarter." Jeremy reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We will. We've got more allies now, more proof this works." He paused, voice turning soft. "Charlotte, what happens after Redwood Falls succeeds? Will you stay here or go back to the city full-time?" Her chest tightened at the thought of leaving him, leaving this land. But she smiled, eyes shining. "I'm not leaving. I've found what I was looking for. A home, real work that matters, people who see me for who I am." He slipped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. "Guess that means this cowboy's stuck with you." She laughed, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I wouldn't have it any other way." They stood there, the night still and peaceful, a gentle breeze carrying the faint smell of hay and wild grass. In the distance, a wolf's howl rose, but it was no longer a threat, more a reminder of the untamed beauty they'd learned to face head-on. As the moon climbed high, Charlotte closed her eyes, recalling her first days on the mountain trail, the terror of that wolf attack, and the humble cowboy who saved her life. Now, she was saving his world, and in the process, finding her own purpose. The hush of the fields enveloped them, a final image of two souls standing together against the vast night sky, united by love, bound by hope, and ready for whatever the dawn might bring. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.